like to announce that this meeting is being recorded. Jonathan, can you do roll call?
Director Brandt.
Here.
Director Geis. Director Geis. Director Bertrand.
Sorry. Here.
Director Thurlow. Director Freeman.
Here.
And Director Nguyen.
Here.
Reminder to the board to unmute yourselves when you talk. Thanks everyone for being here. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Aniskoyo, the land that Isla-Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. With that, we'll go to the consent agenda. Do any directors have any items they'd like to pull? And a reminder to give me a little wave and unmute yourself when you talk if you do.
Bertrand here. I'll move approval.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And seconded by Nguyen. Any public comment on this motion? All right, with that, we'll call the question. Jonathan, can you do a roll call vote?
Director Brandt.
Yes.
Director Freeman.
Yes.
Director Thurlow. Director Geis.
Yes.
Director Bertrand.
Yes.
Director Nguyen.
Yes.
Okay.
So do we have to have officially George saying the word
Director,
yes on the?
That's right. I just unmuted him.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Do you vote yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, motion passes 6-0 with one absence. Okay, now we will open up the public comment period. This is the time for any members of the public who would like to speak on items that are not on the agenda may speak. Jonathan, I know we have at least one request to speak. Did we receive other requests as well?
We have two, but they're for specific agenda items. Or, oh, sorry, no, one of them is actually.
Looks like we've.
Yeah, one's listed under general.
Yes. Okay, I'll let you go ahead and unmute Mark, and we'll give Mark 3 minutes.
Okay, he should be unmuted now.
Yeah, hi everyone. Am I heard?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, thank you for like having this meeting, and I'm really kind of glad to be back in the swing of IVCSD meetings. Basically, my public comment is about like large massings of people, and I put it more articulately in writing, but basically I'm kind of fed up with my neighbors like having parties with people that I know for a fact do not live there, because I'm familiar with who my neighbors are. And I'm just wondering if there's any like groups of people that can be contacted, or any sort of like thing that can be done either on the CSD level or the CSD in conjunction with the city of Goleta or the sheriff's office, to say like to see if there's anything we can do about people that are obviously not kind of following best practices regarding COVID, and they're not doing anything past noise ordinance levels, and but I am frustrated by like basic lack of self-control and kind of hedonism. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mark, for those comments. I do want to follow up by asking Deputy Schroeder, who I believe is on the line with us. Deputy Schroeder, I know that people who are experiencing a disturbance of peace may call the sheriff's office and ask for the sheriff's office to take action on that. Is the situation that's described something that rises to that level of appropriateness where you would be able to take some action?
Sorry, I need to unmute Justin. My app is going really slow.
All
Okay,
right, you guys got
Justin,
me now?
you're
That
unmuted
was-
now. Yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you for the question. Yes, absolutely. That is something that we as a department would respond to. We did that multiple times over the Deltopia weekend. Our stance currently is still basically a warning, and then a strong warning after that, and then a stronger warning, and then possibly a citation. Again, we're really trying to make it seem like we're not out there citing and arresting folks who are going to the grocery store or going to the pharmacy or things of this nature. However, Mark, to your point, large gatherings and parties are not protected by that kind of rule that we're going by. So absolutely, if we respond and there's a grouping of over 10 people, we're going to issue them a warning. And if they continue to have that group of people who are not roommates, we'll go ahead and start with a citation and possibly an arrest after that. It hasn't come yet to the point where we've issued a citation for that violation, but we are prepared to do that if it's bad enough. So please do call us if you see that violation. We'll be happy to respond.
If I could just thank oh my God, Officer Schroeder for the answer to that. Yeah, I've had more people piss in my front yard since COVID than prior, so I appreciate the answer.
Thank you, Justin, for your help and as always, your attentiveness to the community. And I think seems to me anecdotally that people are doing a decent job of social distancing, but it's important to remember that there is not a relaxation of social distancing. It must continue, and that we must continue it until there is a modification of the order. It's really important for the health of our community. Okay, with that, I am going to close the public comment period, and we're going to go to item 4.1, which is the library services update. First, I just want to start off by giving a big thank you to this board for the position that we took at the last special meeting that we had last Monday. In that position letter, I think we really outlined our strong desire to partner with the city of Goleta to provide satellite library services in Isla Vista. And I think that message was really well received by their city council. Their city council voted unanimously to move forward with a model that would allow for 15 hours, 3 days per week of satellite library services in Isla Vista at the community center or community room in our facilities. And really want to say thank you to the Goleta City Council. It was a lot of, I know, last minute working on this as soon as we had a chance to review the report. And thank you to City of Goleta staff as well for being quick on their feet to be able to put something together that is going to work for our community. And also a big thank you to Assemblymember Monique Lamone. Through her work in state legislature, we were able to secure $200,000 in funding that goes directly for a library in Isla Vista. And this is money that she got in the state budget. It wasn't part of any specific program, just through the discretionary revenue fund. So really shows her prioritization for services in our community, and we're really excited about that. Basically, now from what the Goleta City Council has put forward as a directive, we're looking forward to working with City of Goleta staff to implement something in Isla Vista. And I think that something that I'd like to see from our board today is to give staff direction to approve facilities usage arrangement that is at a essentially free cost to the city. This was a big part of our argument that we put forward to the city council for how we could best partner. And I think that it'll be good for us to codify it. And also just want to use this opportunity to talk a little bit just in general about libraries. And I know we also have, I think we're joined by Library Director Allison Gray. as well as Assistant City Manager Christy Schmidt. And so I wanted to thank them for being there and allow them to add anything that they think I missed, or just go ahead and give any remarks that they would have. So thank you to them. I think that they're still on the call with us. I can't really see everyone that's on.
Yeah. So this is Allison. Thank you for inviting us to speak with you. You don't need me to go through the Harwood report, do you? Or would you like me to? I can do that.
No, it was very thorough, but I think we've had the chance to be through
Okay.
it, or go through
All
it.
right, so I thought that what I would do is talk to you about the option that the City Council voted on and approved on. We've sent the grant application to the state, and so I thought I would talk to you about what our plans are, what we're working on, and a timeline. However, the timeline is the one big question for us now with COVID. Everything that we thought would happen on a nice, easy schedule now is kind of up in the air. So we're working to be as creative as possible to get things to the different parts of Isla Vista. And so the van may be not the first thing that we purchase. The book vending machines may be constructed in China, so we might not be able to get those right away. But what we're looking at is definitely, let me just go through the budget kind of with you. So we are getting a van, a cargo van, that will allow us to bring services throughout the Isla Vista community area, and not just the IVCSD area, but the greater Isla Vista area, because that's where we receive per capita income from. So we want to serve the whole Isla Vista area. That van will allow us to transport materials for people to check out, to transport tables that we can set up pop-up programming at apartment complexes, at the school, the senior center, at all different places, the teen center, wherever we can set up our tables, we want to set them up and provide library services to people. And we've committed to, as you said, 15 hours a week at the community room. And we'll do the hours that you decide you think would be best. And we will provide library services there. And we've been planning on, for a long time, I've been trying to figure out how we could get the students to the Goleta Library for a series of courses that have been working really well at other libraries called Adulting 101. And so we're working on putting together a set of classes that are for new adults. How to manage your student loan, how to create a good budget, how to shop successfully for food, how to handle your credit card debt, things like this. How to manage your car if you have a car, just bank loans, things like this that people that are new to college and new to living sort of on their own maybe could use a little bit of help from the experts locally. We're also putting together ideas that have worked well elsewhere. We've had great results at the library with programs like ghost hunters coming and talking about how they do their ghost hunting. And we had great attendance by college-age students. And so we're looking at different things that we can bring to the community room for programs for your students. We're also certainly have tons of children's programming that we are pros at and can bring anywhere and everywhere, and senior programming and Spanish programming. So we're all working on different types of programming, but we know that you are particularly concerned with the college and university population. So we want to make sure that we are serving them as best we can, since we cannot oblige with the textbook request. So we can provide quiet study space, And I know that my children's librarian and I participated in a volunteer program at UCSB last, I think it was in the summer. And a lot of the students said they would love to volunteer at the library, they just couldn't get there. So I think you've got a great pool of students who would be willing to volunteer at the community room, and you could run that as a quiet study space for 5-6 days a week with volunteer help. So I think there's a lot of potential for that space for university students. We've thought that with the grant, we are going to be buying the cargo van, of course, and that will allow us to bring materials all around Isla Vista. We're going to purchase 4 book and material vending machines. They almost look like snack machines, but they have books and other materials in them. We assumed that you would probably want one of those at the community room, but if you don't, let us know. We will bring 10 freestanding little libraries. They're quite large. There was a picture of those in the report that we did for the city council meeting, and we will restock those regularly. We'll have 4 book drops in the community, and we thought we would put one at the community room to make it easy for people to return materials. We'll bring programming materials there, and so we will be ready always to do pop-up programming and reading clubs for both children and the students and adults. So we are really planning on having a number of locations throughout Isla Vista where books are available and DVDs, music, magazines, things available for everyone. They won't need to have a library card. It will all be just take it and return it when you're ready to. We just want to make things as easy as possible for everyone. And we will have 2 part-timers working a total of 40 hours. So 15 hours will be devoted to the community room, staffing that for the 3 5-hour days. And then the other 25 hours will be devoted to other spaces in Isla Vista. We've already heard from Isla Vista Elementary School. They're thrilled and want to sign up for a number of hours and have each class level, each grade level, get a couple of hours each week. So we're going to work with them, of course. And so we're very excited about the services that we're going to be able to provide. When we're at a site, we'll be bringing our own personal Wi-Fi devices and laptops for people that need to use computers. We'll bring a printer as well. The printer will only be usable in places where we have access to a power plug, of course. So we're really excited that we're going to be able to provide a wide array of services for all ages. And we didn't want you to think that we were ignoring the student population. It was just that, unfortunately, the textbook issue is not one that we can solve for you. We would suggest maybe talking with UCSB and SBCC to see if they can have more textbooks at their libraries. And I will certainly look into whether there are any databases that offer access to textbooks. But there's just no space or budget for that. But we can offer programs, we can offer recreational reading, we can offer research help, and as I said, lots of materials. So that's the plan. We should be getting we'll be getting the money in 3 increments. We're hoping to get the first increment sometime next month. And then we'll figure out what is available to order that will come quickly so that we can make an immediate impact. Then my understanding is we will get another increment of the money in August. And then the final increment of money will come in April 2022. The grant project ends on the last day of March in 2022. So that's our plan, and everybody's working hard on establishing programs that we think will be popular with your students. We would love to create a committee and get some input from the students. If someone can help us help us get someone who will talk to us, which was what we had no success with when we reached out to try to have Harwood conversations with the students. So if perhaps you might be able to connect us with some students that might be interested in talking with us about what kinds of programs they would come to, that would be great. That would be really helpful to us. Because we want to do things that are needed. We unfortunately, right before COVID, we installed a pop-up library device at the USEN where people can download ebooks for free without having a library card. And it was working really well, but it was about a week before everything fell apart. So that's one thing that we will be installing again when things change for the better. And we'll have another one that if you would like to install it at the community center, or we have one at the teen center, and the teens are really using it quite a bit. So we'll have different options for things like that as well. Can I answer any questions?
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate that. I'll go to our board for questions. I think I see a hand from George. I'll go to you, Director Thurlow.
Yeah, on two very, very separate topics. First is, I think we should send a letter to the Goleta City Council thanking them and expressing our appreciation. Never hurts to thank people. My quick question, and I'm not sure who the best to answer this. We're getting $200,000 in one-time money. Where are we going to be a year from now when there's no more one-time money?
This money is being given to us to set up a pilot project. So my hope is if the pilot project works, and a lot of the things that we're purchasing are things that once we have them, we will have them. And so a lot of our second year costs are really just staff costs. And then, car insurance and gasoline and things. So the first year's costs are larger, but the second year costs are much more manageable. And so we're hopeful that if this works, and we think it will work really well, it will be something that we can work together and find the funding for. I'm also looking for our funding for, we had hoped that we thought we had worked out someone to help pay for the van, but that fell through. So I'm going to be working on that. And I think that we can get corporate funding for almost the full cost of the van, really. So that would be more money toward materials and things.
So we all know we're about to enter a time when there's going to be very, very little discretionary money at any level of government. And I just worry a little bit that you're going to have a wonderful program going with no source of funding, and you're going to ask us to continue the funding. And so really, we need to know, are we making a long-term commitment to underwrite this program should state, local, corporate funding go away?
Hey, Spencer, this is Ethan. Can I respond with some context? Spencer?
Sure. I'll go over to you first, Ethan, and I think Christine from the city.
Thank you, Spencer. So George, one thing that we should keep in mind too is that Isla Vista residents, through the taxes we pay, the Goleta Valley Library gets approximately $180,000 per year to provide services to the Isla Vista area. So that $180,000 is on top of this one-time $200,000 grant from Assembly Member Limon's efforts. So I just want to make it clear that Isla Vista residents, through the taxes we pay, it goes to funding our local library services. So there's more funding coming from our community and to be spent for our community than just the $200,000 grant.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. That helps.
And that, but I will put in that, that funding currently supports the main library. And so to the extent that that funding is removed from the main library, it creates a deficit at the main library. So I do think that we will have to a point where we have to say, how do we continue these services? I think it's a valid question, and I think there isn't a dedicated source of funding now. Luckily, the model that Ms. Gray developed will get us through, we think, March 2022, so well into the second year. Hopefully, we are in a better funding position then. But I think it's a valid question about how do we continue this, and it may be that we can continue the best parts of it, the things that are used the most, and that we'll find that there are parts of the program that really aren't being used and can be pulled back on, and then that could reduce the ongoing cost of continuing to provide the popular services. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Thank you.
I'm going to go over to Jay. I see you have your hand up.
Getting Jay muted.
So one piece of oh no, I'm that's actually a different computer. I'm on two computers at the same time. John. Sorry, I'm confusing. I need to fix that. Now you brought up a dialogue on our YouTube live stream. There we go. Okay. So one thing, some context that I wanted to provide for our board, for people who might not have seen it. So the city council meeting, they had discussion about this, and they also talked about the immediate versus long-term funding process. And the one of the things that came up from multiple of their city council members was the idea that by having a strong partnership with us, they felt that would help them both reduce costs going forward. But it did definitely feel like they were intending on leaning on resources from us. And so in addition to the idea that we would be providing space at little to no rent, like $1 nominal thing or something we might be doing if required, that we would be also able to provide staffing support and potentially other resources going forward. And that was explicitly mentioned at the Goleta City Council as part of why they felt that they were like part of what they were expecting from the package of going in and partnering with us. I'm not saying that that's good or I agree with it necessarily. I'm just bringing up that, like, by the way, that is what their perspective was. They also, I will bring up, had a discussion about the idea that when we had brought up our ability to do library services, and Roger Sebs in particular was kind of poking at the idea, can they really do library services? Public comment is already over, so I couldn't try to add in anything, but the fact that we do have that power. But that is now a discussion that they are having, is this trying to look and analyze deep into our letter to figure out what powers we actually have, what leverage we actually have in that regard. And so then I have a question kind of related to this towards, first a clarification question from my perspective towards Allison, and then kind of a question related to this process of this. So first of all, with relation to the $200,000 from the state, one thing wasn't clear to me. That's something that we need to spend by a certain time, and that we need to. Is there a particular allocation that should be primarily towards a capital improvement, or is there anything? Okay, so I kind of got a nod yes on the first thing and kind of a shake no on the second.
I'm confusing you, but No, the state was actually, the whole thing's been a little confusing because it's actually a construction grant. So there's been a lot of confusion from the start. Basically, we can use the money however we want to. So I tried to be as creative as possible in terms of using it for things that we could purchase and own and would have then going forward. I was trying to use it for as little as possible for things that had no shelf life per se. So of course we had to write staff in, but beyond that, pretty much everything in the grant is for materials that will be usable for a number of years. And so because then we can stock, the little libraries, we can stock everything really with books that are donated to us. We buy many copies of bestsellers, and then when they start to run out of steam, we withdraw them. Those will go, to these different tiny libraries. So we have, I don't think we're going to run out of materials for a long while. I tried to be very strategic in spending the money on things that will last a long time, and then knowing what we have at the library anyway, and how we could stretch those materials for a long time as well. So I don't have any concerns about stocking these little libraries, about being able to do programs for any length of time, but we do have to expend the grant money by March 31st, 2022.
Another question I had is that at the in the staff reports on the execution of option 4, it was described that the equipment could be purchased and could be ready to potentially start deploying and utilizing by October of this year. Question on that is, was that like, so it's like, right, it's April, May, June, July, August, right? So it's like 6 months or so. If we are continuing to be in a state of shelter in place for, let's say, an additional 3 months, does that mean that October shifts to January, or is a lot of the setup the process of ordering, collecting, and just unboxing and things that would still be getting done?
It's a new world, and it's hard to answer that question. I've been thinking about, what we could order now. There are certain things that we could order now. I think the little libraries we could order now and have Public Works put them together for us. The vending machines, I have a feeling, are going to take longer than anticipated, because I'm assuming, just an assumption, but I'm assuming that they're probably made in China. But we're going to be looking into all of this and trying to get services out there as soon as possible. And certainly we can buy a car this summer, a cargo van this summer. I just want to make sure, and I know it's a terrible time to be asking corporations to give us money in return for having their logo put on the van, but that's what I'm going to be doing, because I personally think that's, who wouldn't want to do that and have the van being driven all around Isla Vista and then into Goleta to the library to get restocked all the time? I mean, why wouldn't Deckers want to do that? So that's how I'm planning on spending my April and May, is begging for money from everyone I can think of in return for their logo going on this van. So I think that there are things we can do, and but it's impossible to say. Who knows? Do you know? I don't.
So then that brings me to the topic of essentially incremental approaches. And so I'm just wondering if any thought has been put into the idea that I've brought up a couple times, both at the Library Advisory Commission meeting as well as in public comment at City Council, on the idea of doing like a incremental rollout of some of these things in option 4, as opposed to waiting for them all to be ready and then launching them all in a big thing, doing them incrementally.
I had kind of resigned myself to the fact that it's going to be incremental. And I think that probably the little libraries will go out first. And then I think the van will be the next thing, because we have to stock the little libraries. I think that the issue of programming and having space at the community room, we're going to have to wait and see, how things go with that. But I think we can get the little libraries out there. I think we can get, if UCSB opens up in some way, we can get the pop-up library devices so people can download ebooks. We can see if there's a way, if the wireless goes outside the community center, if people stood outside, if they could get the range for their phone to download, that might be something we could offer sooner rather than later. So I think we can be creative and get things going, and then have a nice photo opportunity for everybody when the van comes with its nice wrapping and pretty pictures and logos and things. I figure that will be the big photo op for everybody, but we will be incrementally adding services the whole way through.
Which actually is an interesting, a good setup for my next question. So during your presentation earlier in this meeting, you mentioned providing, like we're possibly at some point getting another one of those pop-up library Wi-Fi devices for the community center. Is that the same type of technology, like the same thing that we currently have in the community resource building next door, or is that?
Yes, it is.
Clarify, their business model, I presume, is on the back end in terms of the number of downloads, number of books used, things like that. They're not making money selling us the actual units.
No, we purchase the unit, and we purchase $2,100 worth of downloadable titles with each unit. So that's how it works. And the unit at the community center was not getting any use because of the flood. I think that was there, but the one at the teen center, and then we have one at the Goleta Community Center, they were both getting really good use. And the one at USEN was doing really well for that 1 week that it was active. So
did I hear you correctly? And did I hear you correctly in saying that is accessible without a library card?
Yes, you do not need to have a library card. And it's a closed network. There's no way to get out into the internet. You can only get into the pop-up library network. Very, very easy to use.
I had not noticed that part before, because I kept assuming that it would require, and then I just never thought about it as I was trying things. So one sadness is that our buildings, the community center building and the community room building, are both essentially just poured and molded out of concrete, and getting Wi-Fi signals through any of the walls, even inside the buildings, much less outside of the buildings. I mean, I've been spending a lot of my my time at the beginning of this pandemic just trying to optimize all sorts of Wi-Fi network issues there. But I'm actually now wondering whether or not the fact that I've kind of solved those for getting a lot of Wi-Fi surrounding the building, if I could just extend that library Wi-Fi zone to also include a large quantity of that entire region, like in even the near future. I might look into that.
Please do.
Then, great. Okay. And then one more question that I have, which is related to opportunities for, so to the extent to which we're now looking at this as a partnership between our agencies, and then looking at things that we could do, particularly given the current situation of not necessarily being able to do that much anyway because of shelter in place and everything. The library is currently mailing books to people. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
We are not doing that right now. The Santa Barbara Library is doing that. They have a foundation that is funding that. So we are not doing that just yet. However, we recently heard that that might be, if we did that, we might be able to be reimbursed because it would be a cost associated with the COVID virus. So if that is the case, and this looks like it's going to go on much longer, then we may consider doing that as well. We did mail out all of the hold items that we had at the library. So we did do that, and we are working with Isla Vista Elementary School in particular to get their students library cards. The PTA president there died very tragically recently, and we had been working with her to get that done. So now we're working with the school librarian and trying to figure out a way to do that without breaking any of the state or federal confidentiality rules. So we're trying to get them cards, which I think ultimately will mean mailing them individually to the students, so they can at least use our downloadable services.
I have a
One
question.
thing, somebody broke in asking.
Sorry.
Oh, it was Father John.
Go ahead, Jay, and then Father John, I'll come to you.
All right then.
Thank you.
Okay. So then on that note, one thing that I've been meaning to bring to you, Allison, is which the last few days that I realized that it actually kind of ties in with other things that our organization is doing. Is some interest that came to me for doing a sometimes they call it like a seed library. But there's been a lot of complexity with relation to people wanting to get to start growing more food at home and then being able to get access to seeds. And I know that that's something that has come up in library context before. And one of the big complexities is that, like, well, if you're introducing seeds from random people inside of things, maybe that ends up causing some kind of issue for the library, things like that. But the person who coordinated with us on our community garden project, which is also an IVCSD project, Katie Maynard, was looking into ideas for doing it as a commercial, commercial packaged seeds, and then being able to distribute those if we get to the point of actually mailing books to people. But it occurred to me that that's something that it could potentially even tie in with our community garden project with relation to how it could be another kind of partnership with you. And so I don't know if that's something that anyone on our board is interested in, if that's something that you would be interested in separately, Allison, if you get to the point of mailing books.
I have a staff member that's been begging me to do a seed library for a couple of years now, and I just haven't been able to figure out how we would manage it or where we would put it. So sure, we'd be interested in talking about it.
Well, I'll certainly, if nothing else, connect you with Katie from the university. She's the sustainability coordinator there, and
okay.
And she's very excited about figuring out how to actually pull this off practically.
Okay, yeah, please give her my email.
Okay, Father John.
Yes, I have a question which is sort of for my own clarification. I certainly celebrate everything we're talking about here, all the innovative ideas for standing up what many of us here in the community have been waiting for 50 years. And I think that even our most incremental steps that we make right at the start here are something that's worth celebration. But I am concerned about the sustainability question. And with regard to that sustainability question, I have a fiscal question. We have here a $200,000 grant, which will allow us to stand things up, to make a good beginning of something that might grow into something larger. But yet when we talk about the sustainability of that initial step, we seem to be talking in terms of creative, innovative solutions, charity, volunteerism, potential future grants, but there's really nothing much that is yet put on paper. So my question with that is, we have in the district here for a very long time provided a regular tax funding stream to the main library,
And is there a possibility of some either sharing or at least an understanding that for which we have paid, this would be a good time to see a direct result from it, and would make those of us who pay those taxes be perhaps a little more comfortable with them.
Christy, do you want to address the city financial situation right now?
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, the ongoing funding, I think, is an issue. I think, you know, the same funding, it's always been the same. We've never gotten more funding for the per capita from Isla Vista. In fact, there are other patrons of the Goleta Library through their taxes with the city and through Measure L actually pay a little bit more per capita for the Goleta Library, but that's always gone to fund the Goleta Library. The challenge that we have is everything we take, there isn't $180,000 to take out of the Goleta Library. You know, that is money that helps run that main regional library. And so, you know, it would really be a challenge for the council to figure out, okay, if we are going to divert money from the main library, then what do we give up at the main library? And right now, with our revenues are really doing poorly. I mean, we're very dependent on transient occupancy tax, which is the bed tax, and on sales tax, and so we're seeing a real hit right now. That could recover in, you know, who knows, in a year and a half when we're ready to talk about this. But it's going to be a discussion that has to be had, and it is wonderful to get short-term funding, but short-term funding is just that, and you can't really turn it into long-term funding. But so we'll have to explore other options later. I mean, unless yeah. I mean, we do have other partners. The county is a funding partner for libraries, and they may be interested in doing more at some point. So we can explore all of that then. But this allows us at least to see what programs take and what things really we find valuable, and then readjust if we need to really focus in on those things which could be cost savings, and then we'll have to figure it out over the long term. I wish I had a better answer for you, but yeah, there's not a lot of money floating around anywhere to continue this program.
I forgive a follow-up if I may, but you know, it's that nothing for us without us kind of a thing. And you know, I over the years I have gotten some benefit from the main branch because I was mobile and able to get out there. But so many of those that we represent have never had that opportunity at any time over the last many decades. And it just seems that here we have a chance to, forgive my choice of word, but to redress a grievance that's been there for a long time. And anything where we are paying the taxes, I just would like to see some share of that go back to where that tax is coming from. And I know these are hard times, and we all understand that, challenging times, but I just hope we don't have to be the ones completely absorbing that challenge for the future of a library for Isla Vista. And you know, for the time being, I definitely want to proceed with this, but I just have that caution and that concern. Forgive me.
Thank you for that, Father John. And I think that that a lot of the concerns that you raise, and that I think Director Thurlow and Director Bertrand were getting at as well, are very valid. I think that if you did, the County Board of Supervisors has been reviewing the issue of libraries and how to make sure that there is equitable and adequate funding in the Library Ad Hoc Committee, of which Director Gray is a member of. And they just had a presentation at the Board of Supervisors yesterday about libraries in general. It is a challenging time for all of our local governments and will continue to be, given the uncertainty regarding this public health crisis. But there's been good groundwork laid by the committee to try and form a path towards more sustainable sources of revenue for libraries. And I think that's something that I'm going to definitely stay engaged in and really want to support as much as I can. But the last thing that I'll say is that while this is an equity issue at its core in the long term, we have been providing this source of revenue for a long time and haven't necessarily had the ability for our residents to utilize it in the same way that other parts of the region have. And I think what it's really going to come down to, just for our board and the public to know, is our working with the Goleta City Council to continue to make libraries a priority. If you look at the difference in which cities in the South Coast region contribute, the percentage of dollars they contribute out of their general fund towards the libraries, it varies from city to city. And so it really is a question of priorities for how good your library can be in the budget. And we'll definitely continue to be there to try and make sure that the city of Goleta Goleta City Council is making that a priority. In the near term, I'm excited with where we seem to be heading. I think that Director Gray, your suggestion of putting together a committee is a great one, and I know I would love to serve on it, and I'll ask our board if there are other members that would like to join into that. Really, committee sounds bureaucratic. I really think that we have an opportunity to just make it more of a working group and really hash some of these things out, contribute some of our ideas from what we as board members and our staff has seen that works in Isla Vista for programming, and try and help get some ideas flowing and hear from you and your expertise as well. I'm also, again, want to offer our staff support for outreach to our student population. I know that while I'm not a student anymore, recently graduated student, and we have Ethan and Christy who are on our board that are both students as well. And I think would be happy to provide that input as well as just broader outreach to the community through associated students at UCSB and other student groups as well. I did have one question that's a little bit more specific in regards to your presentation. You mentioned the desire to get corporate sponsorship for a vehicle. And it was my understanding from the hearing that the plan was to apply for a mobile library services grant from the state. Is that not the plan anymore?
No, we thought we had a partner and they dropped out, and the application date for that grant was the day after the council meeting last week. So I couldn't come up with another partner in that one day. So we're not going to worry about it. We're going to find that money on our own. I'm not worried about it. I think we'll find sponsorship.
Well, in that case, I think it's definitely something, and we can continue this conversation in our committee with you, but definitely is something for us to look at in terms of whether or not a van is the best way of doing things, or if there are other ways that we can make the services happen, and maybe with storage on site in Isla Vista in our facilities. We really want to be a partner to be able to make this work as much as possible, and not have to, I think, Director Freeman pointed out, enter into any obligations on your behalf that are, long-term sunk costs in areas where maybe we can save resources, like we're doing with the facilities sharing agreement. Okay. Are there any other comments from members of the board?
Director Brandt, if I may, I think that there's a lot of good that can come from the vehicle component when funding is secured for that. But I really only see that as a small part of the IV program because, I mean, Isla Vista, we're a very small community. You can walk from one end to the other fairly quickly. And more importantly, we have these wonderful facilities with the community room and now the brand new community center that really present a lot of potential for good use and programming in a great space. So, and furthermore, I can totally see the value of having a van for the overall library system. I mean, especially in the city of Goleta, it's a much bigger place with distinct neighborhoods that could really help out. In IV, again, it could certainly be a part of it, but I think we can accomplish so much outside of the van as well.
If I can just jump in here, we really do need the van for the Isla Vista project because we will be shuttling materials from the Goleta Library to Isla Vista on a daily basis. So it's really critical for the grant.
Director Freeman?
Yeah, actually, even like provide some further context on the van thing. The library currently does not have a vehicle. And so they would just be using personal vehicles and we're like small sedans that might have other stuff in them to try to move things. And so that's a part of the reason why the van it ends up being such a critical component. Also, it had come up during city council, maybe Allison can provide some more color on this, that the mobile library services is something that people in the library industry have seen a lot of strong and powerful usage from. And during our advisory committee meetings, it had come up that if you have like a family of people you're having to get across Isla Vista, that can be much more complicated than, for example, like myself, I can just walk the other side of IV. But if you either have any disabilities or you're like a large family, there can be some complexities even in only a half mile.
Question for Director Gray, is the plan for a van eventually to use it dedicated specifically for Isla Vista, or would it be serving the library system at large?
During the grant period, it would be serving Isla Vista 40 hours a week. That would be its sole use. Afterwards, we don't know. But through March 31st, 2022, that ban is for Isla Vista, period. Its only stops will be to the Goleta Library to pick up supplies and staff.
Okay, so with all due respect, just want to get it straight from you. We have discretionary state money that's been secured by our elected officials specifically for a satellite library in Isla Vista, and the plan is to use some of that money for the time in which we have the grant money, but then when the grant money runs out, then it would go to the city at large potentially if there wasn't additional funding identified. That just seems kind of backwards to me and not in keeping with what the intention of the funding is, and I don't think that it's keeping in the intent of, frankly, what the city council had at the hearing.
I don't think that's what I said, Spencer. All we know right now is that through March 2022, we are going to be using the van 40 hours a week at Isla Vista. I can't prognosticate farther than that.
I would say our hope is that we will find a funding source and we will be able to continue the services. I think in talking to Director Gray and her staff, they're excited about this as a long-term program and not just as a short-term program. But I think she's just trying to be honest, which is, right now we don't have that secured long-term funding. But I think the hope is that it would continue to be an Isla Vista program.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that, and we'll continue to advocate to make sure that it is turned into an ongoing program in the future.
Yes, and Spencer, I'll just add one more thing. I think our concerns that we have are clear. We definitely have them, but more importantly, I am really excited for this opportunity. I think there's great potential for partnership with existing services in Isla Vista. whether that's the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District's Kids Recreation Program, the St. George Youth Center, IB Youth Projects, Isla Vista Elementary. We have a lot of aspects of our community that will benefit from this. I think we should continue to work through our concerns. But overall, I am grateful for the city for moving towards this point and excited for our partnership going forward.
May I just make a plug for library services right now, because I'm a librarian and I have to do that. Since everyone's sheltering at home, the library is providing a number of services online. You can download for free books, ebooks, e-audio books, movies, TV shows, magazines, comic books, and graphic novels. If you don't have a library card, you can apply for one online and you will get it immediately, and it is usable for 6 months for downloadable services. We also created a special, very extensive web page called something like Things to Keep You Busy During This Time. And it's receiving national attention because other libraries didn't think about doing that. It's broken down into a lot of different categories. There are things, if you're really bored, you can help the Library of Congress transcribe some of their historical documents. You can learn how to sew face masks if you want to help out the hospitals. There's lots of really cool things there to do if you're dying because you can't travel like I am. There's lots of armchair traveling sites. Lots of things for kids, teens, families, and adults. So I urge you to take a look at it. It's pretty cool. So thank you for letting me make my little pitch.
Thank you, Director Gray. Thank you for your work putting that together. That sounds very excellent. I know I'll be giving it a look. As a history major, transcribing historical documents actually sounds pretty fun to me. So I might have to give that a try. I'm really excited for what we're going to be able to do together. And I just want to put out a call to our board members to see if there are others that would want to serve on, I don't know if we're calling it a committee or a working group, or I think the title is not important, but basically work closely with the City of Goleta library system to tailor how our services are being delivered in Isla Vista. I see a yes from Jay, I think. I'm assuming that's a yes. And I see a yes from Father John. Okay, so we'll be in touch then with the two of you, if that is kosher with the rest of the board of directors. I'm assuming that it is. And thank you, Director Gray and Assistant City Manager Schmidt, for being with us today. I'm really excited for the partnership and just really excited. I know there's a little bit of just uncertainty that we've talked about tonight, but I also really want to emphasize that Isla Vista never has had dedicated library services provided at a physical dedicated location. And so I think this is a huge step forward. I'm really excited for what we're going to be able to do together. We've talked about a number of really innovative ideas, partnerships with other local government agencies, nonprofits in the area that serve youth, families, students as well, and providing study space. And I think we'll continue to look at that issue, maybe not in the form of specifically textbooks, but other books that the Goleta Library already carries that are commonly assigned in college and university classes that would just be a benefit and make the most sense for our population. So thank you again, and we look forward to working together.
Thank you for having us.
With that, I do want to ask the board if I think it will be important, just let's codify it, that we would like to enter into a free facilities arrangement with the Goleta Library. If anyone would like to make that motion.
Bertrand here. I will move to direct staff to work with the City of Goleta to develop a facilities use agreement for library services.
I will second that motion.
Made by Bertrand, seconded by Freeman. Is there any further board discussion? Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Jonathan, can you call the question? Give us a roll call vote.
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Freeman,
Yes.
Director Thurlow, Director Geis,
Yes.
Director Bertrand,
Yes.
Director Nguyen,
Yes.
Director Hedges.
Yes.
George, I don't think I heard you if you did say yes.
George, I think you're stuck on.
George, you
mute.
say yes?
Yes. Did you unmute me?
I just did, yeah.
All
Yes.
right, we heard
I'll
you.
be doing that. I'll keep
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. We look forward to speaking more about libraries and just how essential they are to our community. Okay, next on the agenda, first I want to do a quick, actually want to skip around a little bit and go to the very bottom of our agenda briefly. We have an item regarding the ATP grant for Isla Vista. That is, or not for Isla Vista, I'm sorry, with the County of Santa Barbara Public Works. And we have Brittany Heaton from the County Public Works Department here, just to give us a brief overview of that. And we wanted to set in place a working group to work with the county on that. So Ms. Heaton, thank you for joining us.
And Spencer, I'm gonna recuse myself from this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan.
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Thank you. So I really appreciate you entertaining this item on your agenda this evening. The County of Santa Barbara Public Works Department is in the process of putting together an application for the Active Transportation Program, which is a state program funded with Senate Bill 1, which is essentially mostly gas tax, some vehicle registration fees, but all money geared towards transportation. And this program is a discretionary competitive program to fund projects that encourage active transportation such as bicycle and pedestrian type projects. And if you've been in Isla Vista for a while, you've noticed that the county, first with the redevelopment agency and now Public Works, has been slowly working its way through Isla Vista, trying to build pedestrian facilities mostly, but we have made some bicycle improvements along the way as well to improve safety in the community for pedestrians and bicycles. And we were able to do that with redevelopment funds and then an agreement with UCSB where we were matched 50-50. That money is about to come to an end and we still have some gaps in the system. And we would like to take the opportunity with this grant to fill in pretty much as many of the gaps as we can without overbuilding, within being context sensitive to what the look and feel of Isla Vista is, and maintaining parking, which I know is important. And so we're looking at some of the north-south routes as well as a few more of the east-west routes. Past projects that we've done, we've been able to just do a couple blocks at a time on Trigo and Sábado Tarde, and we've filled in some things along Del Playa, but we really want to just go ahead and with one swoop, get the rest of it done. And so what we're looking for in the absence of being able to do a more robust community outreach effort at this time is a group of folks who can help inform the project and give us some sort of design principles, because we have to get a little creative, especially where we have some constrained right away, and some priorities. We've been working away using the Isla Vista master plan that's pretty outdated, but I think still relevant. And so I think we have a good idea of where we need to go, but it's always good to get some, up-to-date relevant input. And so I'm hoping that there are a few of you who'd be interested in sitting down with us initially just to go over some thoughts. And then as we come up with a better concept, agree to those or approve those, at least on paper. And then we come back to the whole group. And the timeline for this is pretty tight. The applications right now are due June 15th, although the California Transportation Commission, who ultimately will approve the applications for funding, has indicated that they are entertaining an extension to either July or September. And so we could have another month or 3, which would be great because then maybe we'll be in a situation where we could even go beyond this group and take it, at least have 1 or 2 public workshops. But in the absence of that, I'm really going to rely on this group to help me out here. And so I think that's a good broad overview. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Ms. Heaton. I'm really excited to hear about the prospect of north-south sidewalk improvements. When our board undertook the Isla Vista lighting expansion plan planning process and outreach process, that was one of the things that was identified as potential for improvements and highly desired by the community. So I'm really excited about that. I would love to join a group to work with you and help perform outreach. I think the idea of doing some sort of an internet town hall would be really cool. So we can work together on that. And I want to ask board members again if there are any of you that are interested in joining us as well to work with Ms. Heaton on this grant outreach proposal.
I just have a question. How big of a grant are we trying to secure? Is it $5 million or?
It can be, yeah. So we're looking at they have 3 different tiers of small, medium, and large, and we're thinking that our grant falls within the medium range, which is the threshold is up to $7 million. And that's mainly because we've done so much already, and there's a lot of infill. I have some rough estimates for some of the areas we've been looking at in the $3 to $4 million range, but I don't think that they include everything that we'd like to do at this point.
Thank you.
Sure. And I'm
Jay,
glad.
I'll go over to you.
Oh, go ahead.
I have some interest in this topic area, but I also am on a lot of things, and I don't always feel maximally effective on all the things that I'm on. So I will put my name down at the bottom of the list of people who are interested in doing this. And if you don't have enough people to do it, I will do it. But
thank you, Director. And sorry, Ms. Heaton, I think I cut you off there.
No, that's okay. I apologize. I did want to mention that Director Brandt brought up lighting, and that's also something that we can consider in this grant. I mean, there will be limitations because there will be a schedule that we have to meet in order to be eligible in terms of delivery of the actual construction of the project. So, I don't anticipate that we'll be able to full build out, but where lighting is an integral part of creating a safe space for pedestrians, that can be part of what we're applying for as well.
Thank you. That's really great news to hear. I know we had asked the supervisor's office about that, and it's good to hear that we can consider lighting as a part of this as well. Are there other board members that have questions about this? Okay. I'm going to open up the public comment period. I think we've got at least one comment submitted from Mark on this. I don't know if there's others, but we'll go ahead and go over to Mark.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, that little, what Jonathan was just showing right there was kind of a mini infrastructure rant that was generally aimed at what I thought this would be. So first and foremost, if there is, and I really don't know, if there is a potential for citizen involvement in this, I would just like happily identify myself, because the ideas of public walkability, bike infrastructure, and lighting are things that I have a lot of passion about. And specifically in some of the north-south walkways, I've noticed that there are incomplete sidewalks, which I think is really frustrating. If you have a disability, you'll get halfway through a walkway and then you'll have tree roots in front of you and have to go back and then go into the street if you have like a wheelchair, for an example. And then also more broadly, like, and if I may or may not have heard this correctly, but if this does include bike infrastructure, I mean, I've said this for a long time that I think the university does a lot more than Isla Vista itself to encourage biking. And I think that if there was some more dedicated infrastructure outside of the pure commercial area of Isla Vista, that I think it would really help facilitate kind of the future of transportation. Because, you know, I'm of the political view that kind of cars aren't the future. And if we could see more, more encouragement of alternate transport, I'd love to be a part of that project. And I just want to fully support my voice in this.
Thank you, Mark. We'll definitely make sure to keep you updated as this moves forward. Okay, with that, I'll close the public comment period. I don't think we need any action right now from our board, but we've heard who's interested. If you are interested and haven't said anything during the board meeting, feel free to email me and we'll put something together. Thank you, Ms. Heaton, for the presentation. Look forward to working together with you on this. This is a big deal, as you've mentioned, since we don't have the redevelopment agency revenue anymore. It's much harder to fund infrastructure improvements in Isla Vista, and this is sounds like potentially a big chunk of money for a really important project. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you so much, and thank you for accommodating my schedule. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay. With that, we're gonna go back.
Actually, Spencer,
go ahead, Jay.
Before we leave this agenda item, so the agenda is written as we'll select members to serve on the ad hoc committee. Do we at least need to form the ad hoc committee even if we don't select the members?
I don't think we need to do that. I mean, that's not how I've thought about this as staff. I don't know if there's our policy that says we have to.
No, but this is what we put on the agenda.
Okay. We can, if someone wants to make a motion to make the committee. I see George is waving his hand, I think. Sorry, kind of hard to see your hand with San Francisco in the background. George, I think you're...
Let me mute him. It's, give me a second. Unmute him, one second. Losing his name. There it is. Here we go, George.
I'll make a motion that we direct the board president to select an ad hoc committee to advise County of Santa Barbara Public Works Department on the application of an ATP grant for Isla Vista.
I will second that motion.
All right. Made by Thurlow, seconded by Freeman. Is there any further comment on this motion from the board? Any public comment? Okay. With that, Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Yeah, Director Brandt.
Yes.
Director Freeman.
Yes.
Director Thurlow.
Yes.
Director Geis. Director Bertrand. Oh, he's recused. Director Nguyen.
Yes.
And Director Hedges.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0, 1 recusal. Thank you again, Ms. Heaton. We'll be in touch to talk more about this soon.
Thanks.
Okay, with that, we're going to go back to item 4.2 for the presentation on the Community Center Grant Budget Update. Lori from IVYP has been very patiently waiting, so I want to just hand it over to you and say thank you for the budget update.
Hi, thank you. We did our presentation last time that I joined you, and just wanted to share the budget, how it has changed, and where we are year to date. So the most significant change in the budget was that our initial estimate for the salaries for our 2 positions came in higher than we expected. So we budgeted, I think $70,000 for the director and $18 an hour for the community room manager. And in conversation with Jonathan and in our hiring process, we needed to come up from that. So the fully loaded cost for those 2 positions went from $134,440 for the year to $149,372. The other addition is that the supervision has been considerably greater, and it's been my time, not the time of Anna Meyer or Family Resource Center. So that's been an increased expense. Of course, the other expenses are not as high as we expected. We weren't open until January, and obviously we closed operations on March 13th. So the costs of programming are considerably less. So the last column is where we are year to date. And we've expended $137,000 of the $177,000 grant. And that's where we are. I'm happy to take questions. And we are still thinking about what do we want to do going forward. And I think given everything there, it makes sense for us to spend real thoughtful time planning and not rushing into immediately rehiring.
Okay, I'll open it up for the board for any questions.
So Lori, it's my understanding that our staff for those positions have both left your organization. And so therefore, we really don't have any staffing unless it was going to be you for the next quarter, I assume.
That's correct.
And so we really haven't given you any direction yet, whether we just want to suspend that agreement, or I think you've had some discussions, but we haven't come to a final conclusion.
We haven't had discussions at all. This takes us through the end of March, which is when both Deanna and Paulina terminated. So that the salaries and benefits go through that time. I mean, where we are in terms of expenditures is sort of frozen at this cost, other than than my time in figuring out the next step. But I see this as sort of frozen where we are with no further direction at this point.
Okay. Hey, would you just make sure you tell Paulina and Diana, thank you for their service. I think we were moving in the right direction, and they ran into things like mold that didn't help. and then, you know, the coronavirus. So, you know, it's just unfortunate. We got a couple of hiccups on the way, and looks like we got a big one now. So
Yeah, I'm sure, I believe Jonathan shared in the documents Deanna's final report on the, you know, what we've accomplished year to date in that community room, in terms of very promising programming, a lot of engagement with students, with families, listening to the library conversation. That's certainly an area of partnership going forward. And as I presented last time, there's many unanswered questions in terms of governance and decision making and liability. So that still needs to be worked out. And we have a silver lining that we have time to really think about it. Don't need to make all those decisions while we're running things.
thank you.
So I guess I just have one question, which is so we just approved the invoice that covers the term from January to March. So that my understanding that we're all caught up then, and that's the total amount is reflected in this bottom line 137 year to date total.
Yeah, the amount we've given IVYP is about 133,000. So the year-to-date spending is 137. So $5,000 ish difference.
Okay, so there's just the small residual that's still left over.
Yeah.
When we initially had intended for me to come and speak about the budget was before we knew Deanna or Paulina was leaving. And we really wanted to talk about the gap in the salaries and benefits and then what we saw in terms of programming. Of course, all of that changed very quickly, both the programming and the salaries. So this became a very different presentation.
Yes, and thank you for that. I don't think any of us could have foreseen not just our turnover in personnel, but the current crisis that we find ourselves in, and the sort of stoppage in public gatherings that we found ourselves at. But I think for our board and for our district, this is a really good time for us to try and retool. I think we really are, as you've said, going to try and find the silver lining in this. So that we can try and continue a partnership with IVYP into the future that's retooled and meets everyone's needs in exactly the way we need it to, and be prepared for when we can all go back outside again and go in public. George, I see your hand. I'll go over to you.
From the Golden Gate Bridge. If we're, as we go forward, I really think it's critical that we use this time to come up with a strategic plan for the community center. And also we iron out all these things that kind of surfaced in terms of fundraising and strategic plan and programming, all the things that we kind of learned, the lessons we learned that we spent $130,000 to learn. But I think this board has an obligation to come up with a really, in consultation with IVYP, a really solid go forward business plan. I don't think we just in 6 months kind of go, okay, let's do this again.
Thank you, George. And I guess you bring up a good point, so I'll ask Jonathan and Deborah, because I know the last time that this came before us, we actually did vote to go forward with doing I don't know if it was a strategic plan or just a plan in general for what the grant agreement would look like and what operations would look like.
Okay.
And want to know if you have any other developments on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely working on it. And then, with the new agreement that the county sent us for the lease, also, was another mix in that calculation. But working on how to move forward there. We'll have something soon for the board to think about.
Can I ask Jonathan, what's that going to look like?
To be honest, I think there's part of this that we have to talk about in the closed session, but personally, I'm thinking that we're going to need to bring the staff under our roof in the long term. And long term meaning starting in the summer or sooner if we can make that happen. And they'll just be, we're going to have more facilities needs in terms of actually managing the physical parts of the facilities. So Deborah's been stepping up and doing a lot of that, but it's going to also need to, her job description doesn't necessarily include that. So we're going to need to do some restructuring and shuffling around of duties within our organization.
Thank you. You can put me back on mute now.
Any other questions from members of the board? Okay. Lori, thank you for bringing us this update. We look forward to continuing to work with you on the path forward, and thank you for all the work that you've put into this.
You're welcome.
Hey, Spencer, I just have one more comment.
Oh, go ahead, Bob.
We were running, and Ivy Youth Projects did a great job of running the community room for a long period of time. We didn't have access to the other building, but we did get a lot done, and we got a lot of great reports about programming in the community. So I don't want to, say we just threw away $133,000. We actually spent it on programming, and we're moving in the right direction. So just thank you to your staff and yourself for those services.
Yeah, and Spencer,
I agree. I really do think that we have laid the foundation. Go ahead, Ethan.
Thank you. Yes, I agree too. I hear what Jonathan's saying about how in the long run, it might make more sense for the management to be under our staff. And if that's the case, we can move in that direction. But the service that IVYP has provided us in this first year has been invaluable for really getting up and running, expanding on what we were doing in the community room and preparing us to really get off the ground with the community center. So I'm really grateful for them. If we are in the future to move towards the IVCSD managing the facilities in-house, I would certainly also want us to still maintain some sort of contracts with IVYP to provide a lot of the services and programs for youth and families, some of the stuff that they do best. So I'm really grateful for IVYP and excited for our continued partnership.
I could not agree more. We've laid a really solid foundation together. Okay. With that then, we will look forward to talking more about this in the future. And we do have a closed session item relating to the community center, not to the staffing as much as the facilities, but it's an ongoing issue. And thanks for everyone for the work we put into it. Okay. Now we are going to move down the agenda to item 4.3, the COVID-19 rental housing mediation program response. And I want to point everyone to the document that's been put together and hand it over to Jonathan to present. First, say a big thank you to Director Bertrand and Director Freeman for the work that we've all done to put this together. The last time that we had a meeting on COVID-19, our board asked us to look specifically at COVID-19 issues and how they relate to housing in Isla Vista, out of the acknowledgement that this is not just a public health crisis, but a financial crisis for our residents, and trying to figure out where the mediation program can fit in to help assist folks. So with that, I'll go over to you.
Sorry, Spencer, you cut off. What was the last sentence you said?
With that, I'll go over to you to present. Or if Ethan, I don't know if you want to jump in and represent it. You really took the lead on preparing a lot of the document as well.
Sure, I'm happy to start off, and Jonathan, come in at any time, and we can go through this together. But really, where this came from is we know that with COVID-19, there are many effects in our community and a lot of spillover effects that aren't directly related to health. One of those effects is housing insecurity. In Isla Vista and our Santa Barbara region in general, we have a lot of housing insecurity, and a lot of the issues that come up are really exacerbated and heightened during this time of COVID-19. There's been a lot of worry in our community, especially among tenants, about various things, such as how will they be able to pay rent? If they can't pay rent right now, how will they be able to work to come up with an appropriate payment plan in the future? If some roommates are leaving the area during this public health emergency, like UCSB has encouraged, and others are staying, who's responsible for paying rent? With people staying at home for much longer than ever before, what types of issues might be coming up as a result of that? These are all issues that are really happening at higher rates due to COVID-19 and the challenges that are associated with it. So our group got together and thought about how our rental housing mediation program can help with this. I think that probably the biggest thing that we're going to be able to help with is this issue about payment of rent. With a lot of people out of work right now and the regulations that are prohibiting evictions and allowing for rent deferral, I think a lot of people are going to need help with coming to agreements about how will they pay their rent when that time comes. Additionally, I think there are a lot of folks who are looking to work with their property owners to figure out if rent reductions are possible in extenuating circumstances. So anyway, that's just a little bit about the intent of this board letter and this proposal before you to help people with housing issues during this time. And I'll turn it over to Jonathan to talk about what the mechanics of this look like.
Great, thanks, Ethan. That was a good summary. And me and Spencer and Deborah have been in the last 2 weeks on different, Ethan too, have been on different calls and about housing security in the community. So this is definitely something that's come up over and over and over again. So it's good that we're addressing it. In terms of what we're gonna do to help actualize this, it's basically giving an upgrade or a boost to the current program in its current state. We still have a mediator. She's not really able to do that much regular work, but for at least the beginning, we could rely on her, but we'll need to secure someone else's services that she's agreed to help us do, is to find someone else who can back her up in responding to calls. We're gonna work with both tenants and property owners to figure out what the best messaging is to get the information out to people, but we're gonna try to do things like maybe a direct mailer to all the households in Isla Vista just about this. We were planning on doing a door hanger, and Deborah had worked on designing one, so now we could repurpose most of that into a direct mail piece that we could send in the mail to every household in Isla Vista, and also do some things online. And then just make sure that the main point is to be able to market this in a way that we're just trying to help both parties figure out things in this hard time. And so we're going to work with both the tenants union and property providers and just everybody across the board to get the word out there. Spencer and I were on a call on Friday with housing coalition in Isla Vista that's concerned about housing issues during COVID-19, and they've agreed to help promote the service for us. So we're gonna, our interns have actually also figured out a great distribution network on Instagram in conjunction with other organizations that promote to our population on there. So they'll be able to help push it out there too. So that's really the main idea here, is to give a big boost in advertising and really focus on the issues that in our marketing and framing on that are related to this current period, and also getting the support of another mediator to handle cases when they start coming up, which might be in a few weeks at this point. And Deborah's been very reliable and really on it whenever requests for service come in, and she's gonna continue being that point person of when a request is sent in, she follows up with them. And the continued challenge, and it's discussed in the next report, is to people should be hopefully coming to the table to mediate, but hopefully that the struggles of this time get people to just be more amenable to sitting down for a conversation over online to figure these things out.
Jay, do you have any other introductory remarks?
Thank you
you helped us a lot with this.
I was really glad for all the work that you put into it, Ethan. I don't have anything particularly to add. I feel like your introduction and letter were particularly good.
Thank you.
Can I just add that I spoke to a St. George landlord, and it was about if it says right there, non-payment of rent and the need to work out a payment plan in the future. I spoke to the landlord, and his name was Cole Cervantes, about a payment plan for tenants who can't afford rent in this period. And he said that he can only offer it if everyone in the household has financial hardship. And so he's not giving any leeway or any help to people unless they offer documentation for every single person in the household that shares financial hardship. And that's kind of difficult because not everyone has the same family issues. And so I just I guess I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for adding that, Christy. And I mean, issues like that, I think we could really help with, because that certainly, while I understand the challenges that businesses are in right now, that doesn't sound like it's in line with the intent of the tenant relief that has been extended by the state and various local governments.
Yeah, thank you for that, Christy. I do want to just add on that one thing when Jonathan and I met with the Isla Vista Housing Crisis Coalition, that was a big topic of conversation, and also a topic of conversation between our housing mediation working group, is that I think there's a lot of residents that are, especially come May 1st, going to be put in the position where they need some sort of housing relief to get by, because our society and our public health officials have taken necessary and swift action, and that is forcing a lot of people, especially within Isla Vista's demographic, to not be able to have any source of income. And so just breaching the conversation with one's landlord is something that I think a lot of people are going to need help with. And I really hope that this program can be a vessel for that, given that it's a mediator who has experience within housing mediation and generally understands both sides of the equation, what it looks like for a tenant, what it looks like for a landlord, and should really should be trusted by both parties to be able to help facilitate an outcome that works for both folks. So even just a question that a lot of folks I think have is, who is my landlord? And so that's something that we really think that just getting this out there will be able to help with. I see a hand from George, so I'm going to go over to you and then any other directors who have comments. I think you got to get unmuted.
1 second, finding. Oh, there we go.
Oh, thank you.
There you
Jonathan, man, you're being mean to me. So I'm interested to know what percentage are we talking about, and how widespread is this? Is this anecdote? I wish we had some data, and I just don't know. The federal bailout money, UCSB is getting $12 million, which will directly go to students for financial aid in the next couple of months. Another $12 million will go for support activities for students. So there is, even if every single student, and this is not going to be the case, but even if every single student were to get an equal amount, that's something like $600 or $700 per student, which is coming in shortly. Now, granted, that's only 1 month's rent, but I would be interested to know. Obviously, the students who've lost their jobs on campus, the campus is trying to take care of them. The students who have lost their jobs in the community, they're in real trouble. I wish I could know how serious a problem this is. It's obviously serious enough. I got a call today from the East Coast from a parent saying, "How does my kid get out of his lease? He's not living there anymore." And I said, "Well, sorry, I don't know." So what's your sense? Those of you that live in IV, how widespread is this issue of students can't afford to pay their rent?
Yeah, so George, that's a great question. And I think it is widespread. And I think it varies with people who literally have no money to put towards their rent, and then folks who are put in a hard spot by paying rent. But either way, I think there is a lot of added financial strain during this time. But that question that you got from a caller on the East Coast, that's what we're hearing every day. That's what we're seeing on social media. And that's what we can see just looking around the community. A lot of people have left. And I think it's understandable that some of these folks are going to have extenuating circumstances where they need help to try to get any possible accommodations or flexibility from their property providers. This whole proposal came partly in response to a question from UCSB Government Affairs Office asking how can the IVCSD help with the issue of students who are locked into their leases here. This is no silver bullet for all those issues, but this is one way that we can step up to help a little bit. I think in a couple of weeks, it's going to be really interesting to see the data about how many tenants in Isla Vista are taking advantage of the protections that have been extended, how many tenants gave notice to their property owners that they won't be paying their rent right now. I'm not sure if that's widespread or what, but we'll get more information on that.
Just to respond to that, I think that's a great point. But I really think there's two audiences here, or there's two constituencies here. One is the person who called me, who's essentially saying, "Hey, it's not fair for me to have to pay rent. My kid's not in that apartment." And there's a whole bunch of that out there, which is, "Hey, I'm not living there. I shouldn't have to pay rent." And then there's the people who actually are living in the apartments who can't pay rent. And so I just, as we go forward, I think we need to make sure that we don't confuse those, because this needs to be need-based. And clearly that's what the $12 million, which is going to flow in. And for sure, there's going to be another multi-million-dollar assignment to City College to help their students. So I just ask that we make sure that we keep those two separate, because anyway, or maybe that's not. Tell me, educate me that
well, George, I think I think, at least from my perspective, what our goal should be within any housing or mediation policy is to try and keep people housed. So whatever that looks like, I have noticed, and I think a number of other of us in the community have as well, that when you have a mass amount of people that leave the community, there's a lot of folks that are going to try and sublease their spaces, which leads to more people moving around and changing hands, and more people coming in to interaction with new people. And I think that that's definitely something we want to avoid. So I don't know if there's a way for us to draw a line between the two of them, but I will say that our outreach is where we can control that. And,
I agree. Well, we need
so
to,
when it comes to social media and internet advertising and direct mail advertising, which is I think what we're looking at, we would focus that on.
Right. Well, and just remember, the university has refunded residence hall payments, and so that whole group of members of our community, if you consider people that live in along Colegio, part of our community, they've all been made whole. But I agree with you. We need to use our position to try and get the landlords to not just think about profits.
Can I just add something?
Go ahead, Christy.
This is really sad, but the St. George landlord also said that even if everyone in the house died, but and he made this clear too, the one person, the head of household in charge of the payments, still has to pay everything that is due, even if everyone died. And I questioned him on that area, and he still said that doesn't matter if anyone died, the payments still have to be made, and that was just that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a great example of really some of the challenges in communication that can take place between landlords and tenants, because obviously that's a completely unreasonable assertion and unhelpful, frankly, statement by the property owner. And I think that it's important for us to work to come to agreements that are mutually beneficial for both parties, and hopefully that's something we can help with. Spencer, you mentioned briefly the sublease issue, which that's something that I don't think I had in the points in the board letter, but that's a great thing to bring up as well, because I know that there's a lot of leases that people have that have prohibitions on subleasing. Many property owners are waiving those prohibitions, but there may be some people who are being held to that and need help. Another thing that is listed in the letter, but just for anyone who hasn't gotten the chance to read it yet, I want to highlight during the move out period that typically takes place in June, that's when people receive their security deposits back. And right now, with a lot of people out of the community, I think we should also be prepared to help people who have questions about their security deposit, and maybe they're not here in Isla Vista during the time of the move out, and they need help resolving what their refund is. Or conversely, on the property provider side, they need help coming to an agreement with a tenant about how much money they need for their unit. So that's just another thing for us to keep in mind.
Thank you, Ethan. Guess the last thing I'll say on this, George mentioned that there's in the federal bill, there's financial aid money for students, which I was really happy to see. Students were left out of the relief bill and do not receive the same check, or I won't even use the phrase students, anyone who can be claimed as a dependent on their parents' taxes. And if you are a full-time student for part of the year, all of the year, you fall under that category. So students are left out of that category of receiving assistance. For our most vulnerable working class residents that are working service and restaurant, sector jobs that are impacted heavily by the stay-at-home order. There are a number of instances that I become aware of where businesses are, instead of laying workers off and thereby making them eligible for unemployment benefits, reducing their hours to essentially zero, or 1 or 0, and not actually laying them off. So they're left out of that potential financial support. So it's a tough time for everyone right now. And I would really hope, especially that our property owner community can understand that. And, I would venture to say, this is just a hunch, not really based off of anything, that a lot of the folks who actually own properties in Isla Vista would be much more amenable to the circumstances of our residents than that the property management companies that are sort of in the middle, sort of acting as a conduit to try and maximize profits. And so I don't know if there's a way that we can sort of raise the conscience of those individuals, but this really is a situation that I think is going to get worse as time goes on, and is exacerbated by the fact that there isn't clarity for how long this is going to go on for. And that's not really a question that anyone can answer at this point. All we can do is make sure that we follow the stay-at-home order and try to bend the curve. And it seems as though what we have been doing is working, which is promising. But I just want to really acknowledge the stress that people are feeling right now and assert that because it is a tough time. I want to thank Ethan for your leadership on putting this together, and I'm looking forward to seeing this through. I want to open up public comment. I know we have at least one request to speak from Mr. Gould. I'll go to you, and then I'll go to Mark.
Hi, I'm not actually here representing IBTU, but I have a lot of information that I can provide to you. In regards to how wide it's spread, the IBTU is getting an average of 6, they're dealing with 6 people per day that are coming in with these questions and issues about how to cancel a lease, subleasing, and quite frankly, what it's boiled down to is the property owners have been very unresponsive in terms of being flexible for the most part. And the law supports that position. If you have a signed lease, most of the leases are joint and severable, which means if 2 people leave or whatever, and I don't think, trust me, I don't. St. George isn't one of my favorites, but when the guy said that everyone in the house could die, I don't think he meant that literally. But according to the law, if everybody else quits paying, whoever's left is responsible for picking up all of the rent. Subleasing, a lot of people are inquiring about that, and the IVTU has a program where when people are relocating, they're providing up to $300 per student for relocation fees, whether it's a rental truck, a storage unit, temporary housing, gas or plane fare to get home or whatever that is. In terms of the move out, in talking with Jen Burcham from Community Housing, they normally do the move out videos for people. And so on the part of what IVTU is doing is educating, and this was just discussed, so it's in the very early stages, but instructing, they're going to put together a how to do your own move out video so that they can use that to get the bulk of their deposits back. So anyway, I guess I just wanted to point out that a lot of the work you're talking about is already being done. They've seen 155 people thus far, and yeah. So anyway, in the interim, while you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, I would just recommend that you refer people over to IVTU, because that system is up and running and pretty efficiently. That's it.
That's a great suggestion.
Thank you, Rodney. I'm going to go to Mark.
I thank you, Spencer. I wanted to like bring up a couple points. And so, for an example, like the idea of getting out of your well, let's start with getting out of your rent, even if just for this time period. So if I'm paying rent as a unit with 2 other people, you know, and I am the one who financially can't afford it, like I think there's a lack of clarity, and I say that because I don't know the answer of whether I can make a payment system with my landlord if I'm not the sole person on the lease itself, and we pay as a group. So there's that side, and then there's the whole idea of like, so I recognize George talking about getting out of your lease for spring, but like, you know, I don't want to like be a doomsday like prepper, but like think about fall quarter. Like I don't know if like, you know, we don't know where this virus is going to happen, and I want to start thinking about like, you know, I love being here, but doesn't financially make sense for someone who can barely afford it now to think about fall quarter. And then another thing I want to mention is that and that I haven't heard at all, but I think is really important. And I know that because I think it's relevant to a few people I know, namely the person who I'm letting sleep on my couch right now, is people whose houses, like whose housemates aren't taking COVID seriously to the point that they feel unsafe. And so they want to leave, but especially because they lost their jobs, they don't have the financial resources to go for one of these cheap sublease places because they can't even pay their own rent. And they have housemates that are bringing people over all the time and not taking COVID seriously, which is, you know, I think you could argue is the lightest form, but still a form of like household domestic abuse, really. And so I would really love to see any messaging really be applied to everyone in any situation, because I think people in those situations, I know people who have left who want to stay here because they feel safer in Isla Vista, but because their housemates, like, you know, they're LGBT folk, their housemates don't treat COVID seriously. They have to go back home to abusive homes and their hometowns of San Diego and et cetera. So I think I would love to consider like all the factors. And then the last really quick thing I'll mention is just that like I recognize, to George's point, that the university has reimbursed like residential fees, but there's a lot of on-campus fees associated that haven't been reimbursed. Like at the bare minimum, I pay $30 a quarter for printing, and I'm not printing anything this quarter. And, you know, and that's like one example, let alone physical infrastructure of lights, like, you know, and so much upkeep. And so I would just love to see that. And I know that's kind of irrelevant. Anyways, thank you for recognizing me.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to go over to Jay. I see your hand up.
I have a few comments and some questions for people. So one is actually kind of a follow-on to Mark's comment about you know, potentially sounding like a doomsday person. In the county board of supervisors meeting last week, they were having serious conversations with the public health director about how the shelter-at-home order might continue through to November. And that is still questions like, well, what are the trade-offs there? I mean, the conversation even got to the point where like even DOS, somebody who you might think of as like, you know, more on the progressive end of, okay, well, we need to figure out how to like organize as a government level, started pointing out how crippling this is for people as the economy collapses. And even DOS is saying things like that we might have to, you know, not go that long, but they were having serious conversations about from the health perspective that we might be going through to November. And you oftentimes hear people commenting about how the only real out we have, if you flatten the curve enough, and you're delaying it until we get a vaccine, and that might be even later. So we could be in this for the long haul, or we could just kind of decide as a community that, like, as a collective world community, that we need to just push the ejector button on this. But there'll be a lot of consequences to that too. So I don't know where it's going to go, but can't assume it's going to be short. I have a question for Jonathan. So the comment come up at various points that we currently have sort of access to this mediator. And I think you had explained a little bit of this, but it became more and more important to me as this conversation has kind of gone on about, do we have a process that we think that we'd be able to get somebody who'd be able to, like, if we actually did a lot of advertising, really got a lot of people, we managed to get, for some reason, a swarm of people. I mean, are we in any near-term capacity going to be able to actually handle lots of mediations?
Yeah, I mean, if we brought it, here's the thing. When we did the first call for mediators almost 2 years ago now, we did get a lot of people interested in the position. So I think if we're going to do that again this week, we have a similar amount of interest. And, you know, what we looked for last time was someone who has a law degree and experience in housing issues. And so I think
just from a timing perspective, though, not necessarily like, is it possible to find somebody? So if we do that this week, how long does it take before we actually have a mediator, even if we get a lot of applications the same day?
I mean, the shortest amount of time, I think, you know, we just need to sign them up with a contract at the next board meeting on April 28th. But I think someone might be willing to start if we really needed to provide service earlier, maybe they'd be willing to, you know, log hours and bill us after that if it was so urgent. I don't know if that would happen, but it would be, you know, we just need to sign a contract with that person to provide their mediation services. Yeah. And we have a boilerplate set up already.
Thank you so much for that. Because one of the things is, like, I mean, one of the things I had came into this conversation, particularly seeing that we had access to Rodney in the public comments, and the thing he also brought this up is the idea that there is sometimes overlap in the thought processes we have with things that the Isle of Vista Tenants Union is doing. But I really had gotten sold a long time ago on the idea that if we have a strong mediator who has influence already in the community, that it is in some sense a power to be able to get landlords who might be otherwise recalcitrant to come to the negotiating table. But I do worry a bit that in the position that we are in, at least right now, and possibly even after we bring on a new mediator, that we're not quite in that same position of leverage, of being able to be like, well, going to somebody that, for example, that landlord that was mentioned earlier, who's just sending back these flippant letters, right? It's just like being able to go to them and say, oh, the last 3 times we went through this, you had these issues, come on, things went well, right? Like, you trust us, we get them to sit down. And so I'm really, like, wish I had a better picture of how to best globally coordinate what we're doing with IB Tenants Union without also with losing our ability to do that in the future, right? Because of course, one of the ability to have the superpower of being able to go to the landlords and get them to the table is that you aren't constantly just like working directly with the union that's fighting them on everything. And then the final thing I wanted to bring up is this. I want to touch on, there was this comment that was made about property management companies, and I kind of mentioned this at a previous meeting. I think it was this previous meeting, but it could have been the previous breakout meeting that we had the breakout meeting that we had with our little subcommittee. But one thing I don't really know, and maybe Rodney does know, because that this might be kind of basic knowledge in some sense, is that property management companies get hired by landlords in order to do things like building maintenance, to coordinate with the tenant, to collect rent, and to also be that talk to the hand, because the landlord wants to go off and just do whatever it is that the landlord either has fun doing or their normal job, and then get the property management company to kind of like deal with the day-to-day people issues that they have to deal with. And my understanding of that relationship is that they get paid maybe a percentage of the rent, but it's a small percentage of the rent, possibly just a fixed fee for doing that kind of work on behalf of the landlord. The thing that I don't understand is, so if, for example, a tenant doesn't pay the property management company, has the property management company gone into an agreement where they are like taking on that credit liability? Like, does it become their responsibility to hound the tenant and bring them to collections and to collect the money, and the money goes to the landlord regardless out of the property management company? Or does the property management company collect their $50 and tell the landlord, hey, I'm sorry, they didn't pay, we tried really hard and we sent them a lot of really bad, nasty grams, but they didn't pay? Like, whose end liability that is, I don't know. And I think that really affects when I'm talking to people who are trying to figure out how to interface with their landlord, what leverage they have on what parties, because there are many more landlords than there are property management companies that are operating here. even though there are some really big landlords here. But it also, I think, affects the strategies that we might have with relation to how we go about this advertising process, this mediation process. So I don't know if anyone else knows the answer to that question. I really should, if nothing else, try calling some property management companies, maybe out of areas they don't care as much about, what I think about them in order to try to figure this out. Or maybe Rodney knows the answer to that.
Well, I know the answer to parts of that. Most of the property owners get a percentage of the rents that come in. And as far as being the talk to the hand person, that's exactly what they are. I think it's going to be hard to move beyond the management companies to the owners themselves. And yeah, I mean, we have found, I guess if it were possible, I mean, Robin's been doing this for 16 years in the community, dealing with the housing issues in Isla Vista. And I think if it were reasonable, I think it would be reasonable to assume that she'd be figuring out a way to go directly to the owners if that were a way to get around this. And so to answer your question, I don't know if the actual property owners get stuck with it, but I do know that they are the ones that go to small claims court. If they're brought there, they are the ones that are responsible for dealing with it.
Yeah, part of the reason I like end up stressing on this and thinking about it a lot is that when you're dealing with the property management company, if they're in some sense not particularly on the hook for the problem. So for example, as you just said, if the landlord is the person who then has to take it to small claims court and deal with all the legal issues related to actually collecting the money at some point, and they're the people who may or may not come out ahead in the scope of the process, then the property management company is really incentivized to just support like the talk to the hand in some sense, right? Like they can take a super hard line approach on things to separate from the landlord, because like worst case, they piss off the tenant and they just walk away. And so, but at the same time, then the tenant can, if the tenant does get angry at them sometimes they're not even really making that much money, or they might themselves be the people who we are trying to help in some sense. And that's why the story I always tell of the property manager who worked on site at the building that I used to live in Goleta, who I could tell, he lost his job. He might lose his housing there because it was more just like a perk of living there. He was terrified of the landlord, but like, it helped me kind of like connect behind the scenes, but certainly didn't want to like help me in any way that the landlord could see him helping me on anything. And so I figuring out how to deal with that balance. And certainly the way that I've been approaching it so far is to try to actually like really pierce the corporate veils and try to help people figure out who their landlord is. I've been giving people instructions on how to contact the county assessor's office, which now are in the various forms of like contact county assessors, ask these questions, then go into this database, look up people who are owning shell corporations in order to then go through in order to try to figure those things out. Yeah.
I assure you, Robin's not doing that.
So I do have one thing, because I think Jay and all of that has brought up a good point, which is the issue that we've dealt with since the beginning of the program, which is that this negotiation and this mediation does not take place between two parties that are of equal power. One has more than the other. And an appropriate counterbalance that I've always supported and we've talked about at the board is forcing both parties to come to the table when these claims are initiated. And so sitting here, I know Ross has told us before that's not something we can do on our own. But I guess I'm just one, for our purposes in the future, if this is something that could, there could be state level action to force property management companies and landlords to come to the table. Is that something that the state has the authority to do, Ross, through an executive order like we have seen in the past? I think you're muted.
Try unmuting him if it doesn't work on his end.
Oh, you know, I think you have to unmute his phone, his
Yeah,
66.
yeah. You should be good, Ross.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a tricky position for the districts to be in, to want to help in such a direct way, to be limited by the powers that are specified in Government Code 61250. And it's definitely a pressing question about the interplay between the local power of the district versus what the state can do. And you know, we as a district are bound by what the Government Code specifies are the activated powers of the district. And what constitutes a tenant mediation program is not specified. So we are within the bounds of what is provided. It's something that it might be helpful for the board to consider is what types of support can be provided through that activated power. And obviously providing a program that supplies mediators is certainly helpful. But part of it from the board discussion comes down to just a lack of basic information that may provide a foundation for renters to then seek out services, both provided for the district or through IVTU, through private means, whatever it might be. So as the board has discussed, a question came up about how fast something could be stood up. I have a couple of points I think that will cover the thrust of the question. One, the state executive order N28-20, which was issued about 2.5 weeks ago, is in effect through May 31st of this year, and that effectively should be halting residential and commercial evictions. Now, of course, always the devil is in the details, but going to the part I mentioned about providing basic information for members of the public to use to either assist themselves or to seek out resources is they may not know that. They may not know that that order has been issued. They may not know what it is that they can do on their own behalf or in conjunction with another service, whether provided by the district, IBTU, or private. So an information sheet is something that the board can talk about whether they would like to spend some of the time. My office can certainly put this together that explains some of these basic questions that the board has been discussing tonight and that certain members of the community have raised as either directly impacting them or directly impacting those for whom they provide services. For example, a lot of people may not know where to look in a lease. They may not know about what's called force majeure, or colloquially known as acts of God, and how that might impact their tenant situation. They may not know what a joint and several clause is in a lease. They may not know about prohibitions against subleases or the requirements for a sublease. So, the district's position is to provide a mediation program, and part of that program can certainly be providing just neutral information that answers some of these questions that are coming up, just to provide a foundation to start from, at least a starting point. Another point I wanted to raise is that the legal industry is having a slowdown of its own sort. So as their client bases of different attorneys and firms or whatnot are being impacted by this new world that we're living in, and for the foreseeable future, however long that may extend, that may put a greater supply that's available to put into this program that might be able to scale up to meet the demand that seems to be growing. And again, to really reach out and to address the different circumstances, whether they be people living in Isla Vista, as Director Thurlow indicated, those two camps of someone's not living there, why should they have to pay, versus those who are living in Isla Vista and cannot pay for whatever their reasons may be. Just having a kind of a clearinghouse for information may be just a starting point, and then there are potentially a number of qualified people who may not know that this program exists, who may want to, for the foreseeable future, take part in it on a voluntary basis or on a cost basis that is favorable to increasing the scale of what was contemplated before. Circumstances have changed, and maybe the program dynamics and how this service is delivered can kind of change along with it, all under the umbrella of the tenant mediation program as set out in 61250 of the government code. Did I answer the question that was given to me?
Thank you for the information. I think that was really helpful. But specifically, just wanted to clarify, the state could take action to force parties to come to the table. I'm thinking about how we looked at the city of Palo Alto's program, where there was a requirement that both parties come to the table and negotiate once a request was initiated. Is that something that it's worth looking into? I mean, I'm just trying to get a feel for what we should prioritize. It's extraordinary circumstances. They're doing a lot of executive orders. You know, is this something that they have the authority to do?
Yeah, and that's a tricky question. In terms of prioritizing what the district can do and what it can't do, as you hear me say all the time, we look to 61250 to see what the enumerated powers are. When you get into questions of what the state can and cannot do, one, it starts to get into an area that's outside of my representation of the district, and I'm just kind of waxing poetical about what the law may or may not provide. But as a basic concept, you've got federalism between states' powers versus the federal government, but you also have issues with respect to constitutionally protected rights to contract, and whether that be in the California Constitution or in the federal Constitution. So, arguably, under current circumstances and for a certain period of time, the state could take some type of action that would encourage some of these informal resolutions that the board has been discussing tonight. But the legality of that on the long term, I really can't say one way or the other. And the courts, for the most part, are extremely restricted in what they are hearing and the services that they are providing. But emergency requests on COVID regulations are one of the areas that are open. If the governor decided to go down that route, then that would be something potentially subject to challenge on an expedited basis. And as always, when you're looking at some type of a state solution, a legislative solution is always the best solution, because it's the people's representatives coming together, putting together and enacting into law the types of requirements that you see coming down. So, for example, some type of a requirement in a lease that landlords and tenants engage in some type of a mediation prior to acting pursuant to their statutory rights under unlawful detainer laws. It's a little bit long-winded, I apologize, but it's a little bit uncertain as to the full extent of what the governor can do via executive order, given those broader constitutional principles.
Okay, thank you for that, Ross. That's a very good explanation. I see George has his hand up. I'll go over to you.
So to help move, am I unmuted?
You're good.
Thank you. To help move this item along, Ross, I thought that was an excellent point that you made, which is, it seems like what we can do right now that would be helpful very quickly. Besides, I mean, I liked the point about we should be referring people to IVTU. But your idea of coming up with a fact sheet of the items that you mentioned, how to sublet, joint severability. Sorry, it's been a while since I went to law school, but all those items, would that be, can you give us an idea about how much of a work product that would be in terms of having you do this extra work? And then I'd like to make a motion that we direct the district's attorney to come up with a fact sheet that can be widely circulated right now as quickly as possible to the community regarding their rights as tenants.
In terms of a timeline, it would probably take, I would say, no more than 10 hours.
Okay.
The district is getting a certain a benefit in terms of cost savings on legal because I'm not traveling. So
Yeah.
you know, some of the time normally be spent, I can redirect to other types of projects like this. So it's conceivable that with a reduced workload and travel time, this can still come in under the district's normal number of hours per month.
Okay.
And certainly I can try and do that.
Okay.
In terms of what we rolled out, I'd say by Friday, maybe probably no later than next Monday.
Okay. Now, the second question is how comfortable are you at putting that out under your letterhead? In other words, I'd like to see it go out as the legal counsel for the district is advising tenants of these rights.
I think that when that happens, it's usually the district asking district council to issue some type of a advocacy type of a position. Whenever we send something out on letterhead, it is typically for the purpose of an advocacy type of a position. Since this is the district acting in its capacity to provide a tenant mediation program, I think something the board should consider is like an FAQ or a fact sheet that's hosted on the website and perhaps advertised through the various networks that the board members have to direct people, to it. But beyond that, it starts to look like an advocacy type of a position when it comes out on our firm letterhead, as opposed to generalized information.
Yeah.
Also, we want to avoid that it looks like we're giving legal advice to people.
Well, that's the piece that I was worried about. But on the other hand, the district puts out something and people go, oh well, that's just the district, as opposed to a law office puts it out and has a lot more credibility. On the other hand, I understand the issue of giving legal advice. So I don't know. How do we navigate that?
So let me jump in here because I think that is a tough issue to navigate. Luckily, I think that there's been some great material put together that already exists that we can just share. And I know that our staff and interns have put together a page on our website that deals specifically with COVID-19 and resources for the community, which links to material from the IV Tenants Union, which I think they did a really excellent job putting together a number of FAQs that people have been having and putting it up on their website. And additionally, for folks in the community that are non-students or just other places where they can look at the information, I think the Legal Aid Foundation has some good material on that as well. I think personally, where I see we can do the best work is to try and make this service known. It's clear from the statistics, as we'll talk about under the next item, that more broadly, this is an underutilized service. And the more that we can do to get the information out there, the better. As we've said from the beginning, mediation is not going to be for everyone. There are going to be people that just need someone like a legal resource center attorney to just give them a little bit of advice on a clause in their lease, or just give them the general lay of the land, answer some specific questions. But there are going to be residents that are going to need help actually broaching the subject with their landlord. And I think that that's where we have the potential to be able to step in. And I think that when we do this outreach, the goal should not just be bringing in more cases to the program, although that is clearly a goal. The goal should also be to spread these resources that exist and these FAQ type documents that already exist into the broader community, because I don't think that they have gotten as much traction. And I think just in general, as like I said, May 1st gets closer and closer, there's going to be much more attention being paid by residents to how they're going to come up with their rent payments. So we really should time it correctly to try and spread the information as widely as possible at the right moment. So George, if you are interested, we have recommendations on the report A through C, which deal with developing a plan to increase mediation services and doing outreach related things.
I'm
if you
fine.
were interested in
I'm-
making a motion
yeah.
at this point.
What's the motion you'd like? Jonathan, do you have a recommendation?
Ethan, was that you?
Yes, the motion that I'd like to see is the one that's recommended, moving options A through C.
Yeah. It could just be direct staff to carry out the recommendations in the report.
That's fine. I'll make that motion, or Ethan, you want to make that motion?
You made it, I'll second.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion made by Thurlow and seconded by Bertrand. Is there any other board comment on this item? Jay, is that a hand, or are you just moving around?
No.
Okay.
I was unmuting myself for the vote.
No worries.
Yeah, everyone should do that.
Is there any other public comment on this item?
Would it be possible to get a copy of the letter?
Yes.
Of the report?
Jonathan, do you think you can link the agenda in the chat? It should be attached to the agenda.
Yeah, it's attached to the agenda. So if you've seen that.
So the agenda that you mailed out, it's also in there. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just like a link to the title of the item.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, then with that, we'll call the question. Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Wait, I was making sure all the board members are unmuted. Director Brent, Director Freeman,
Yes.
Yes.
Director Thurlow,
Yes.
Director Geis,
Yes.
Director Bertrand,
Yes.
Nguyen,
Yes.
and Director Hedges.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Thanks everyone for the work you put into this and the discussion. This is a tough time, and we're going to have to continue working together, especially on an issue like housing, which is just so important to our health and to people's lives. So thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney.
Okay, so with that, we're sort of sticking on the topic of housing and looking at the issue more broadly in the next item, the rental housing mediation annual report. And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jonathan to give a presentation.
Cool. Deborah prepared this report, so she's going to walk you through it, but just wanted to give you the general point of this item is, we started this program 2 years ago as a pilot, and it pretty much ran that way with Legal Aid Foundation until 1 year ago when we took it on as a direct program of the CSD. And then we did hit some hiccups along the way in implementation and, making it the fully realizing its potential. So Deborah's going to walk through the results of the program over the last 2 years in terms of how it's gone, kind of like a performance review. And then there's some analysis and conclusion at the end for us to discuss and see what we want to do next with. And really the reason it's being brought up now is because, we want to be able to take the board's input of where we want to go with this into account in the budget so that we can, budget correctly for how we want this program to operate and how it could be reaching its fullest potential.
Hi, guys.
There you go.
So as you may have noted in the report that was provided, there were a total of 13 requests for mediation services in 2018. So that equated to about one a month. And that did not really change for calendar year 2019. We averaged, or we took in 14 requests, so we were one over than the previous year. The majority of cases that, or requests that we received in 2019 were closed due to a lack of engagement by the parties involved. So this speaks directly to the issue that you were just discussing, in that you cannot, make a tenant and or property owner landlord come to the table to mediate a dispute. That is still one of our greatest challenges with the program, alongside of, or secondary to, the fact that we know there are a lot more, reasons for mediation because of the number of people that live in Isla Vista. So to receive one request a month seems, Jonathan and I were both very surprised that that's the numbers that we are looking at. In 2019, right down to the very last submission, which was received in December, many of the cases, or many of the disputes were resolved. The parties were able to resolve the issues outside of mediation. So they did submit the request, but they didn't follow through with the request because they were able to resolve the issue independently. So that speaks to the reason why the mediation was, a request for mediation was submitted initially, and then whether they actually met with the mediator or not. One of the things that I noted outside of the report here that I provided is that in 2019, there was only one person who actually came in and met with the mediator for advisement, regardless of whether the mediation would take place or not. And I think that that is another issue that we need to make known in the community, is that we do have a mediator available for that advisement, totally independent of whether of the IVTU or the landlord or the property owner's involvement in that. We continue to look for a mediator. We asked our former mediator to fill in until we could find someone, and as Jonathan shared earlier, she agreed to do that. Her actual period of performance agreement was through June 2020, although she, as you know, had some personal challenges and therefore was not going to be available per the scheduled timeline. She agreed to provide assistance and help us look for a replacement. Now is a good time, as Ross spoke to. There's a little bit of a downturn maybe in activity. So we might find qualified mediators that are willing and able right now to take on some of that additional work while they experience a downtime related to the COVID shelter in place situation also. So we have developed materials, outreach and marketing materials, and a plan. And we really want to bring in the board's direction in consideration for the distribution and dissemination of that information. That brings us to a close.
I was muted. Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah.
The one thing I really need to mention is, at the beginning of the program, maybe for the first year, the outreach efforts weren't as strong as they could be. But in this last year, since we contracted with Brandy directly, we were doing tabling in the fall and winter quarters at UCSB with our interns, passing out flyers that did include information about the mediation program and some social media outreach as well, and saw as you can see, there was no noticeable difference in the outreach. So maybe also what needs to happen, this could have been just the way we were promoting the program, it just needs to be marketed and framed totally differently. That could be one change to the program, is how we talk about it and how we explain it to people. We've gone to the property owners directly and gone to their quarterly meetings that they hold with UCSB's housing office, and we pitch it there and we market it there as a service for them in resolving disputes, especially between two tenants. And that did work. I'll say, like, we did get a couple property owners refer their tenants who were having tenant disputes over to us. But I think, I guess the point I'm trying to make is we've done outreach. It hasn't made the dent that I think it needs to make. And even with the outreach we have, it hasn't produced cases. A lot of the cases that do come in are referrals from either UCSB housing office or IVTU, or just word of mouth of someone knowing about the program. So that's one of the challenges we've had, is breaking through. I think doing the direct mail piece that goes to every household in Isla Vista as part of this COVID-19 response earlier will be a big thing to get the word out in a very clear way that there are resources to help people resolve their issues. And like I mentioned, we had planned to do a door hanger, and now we can reappropriate that for the direct mail piece, and that could be a big way to start seeing if that makes an impact in getting the word out. And then again, with the analysis, like Deborah, I think has done a great job in being the point person for this and responding to the claims that come in. And she had 14 come in. It says in 2019, most of those happened while she was working in that last half. And so she was working hard on getting those scheduled. And that was work that I was doing personally before that. And, just to bring George's point up earlier of, if we had Ross's letterhead on something, would that give it more credibility? And we tried that. We tried approaching that issue in different ways. So when we first started the program in 2018, we had our interns doing the they take in the request and they call the two parties trying to schedule. And that clearly wasn't the right way to go about it, because it was the messenger who was calling. It's easy for a property manager to brush that off. I switched to doing it, and I found a little more success. And that's why when we were creating Deborah's position, we said, okay, a part of this job is going to be doing that calling and trying to schedule an engagement with the two parties to give it that more official, it's coming from the IVCSD. But again, it is easy to brush us off on the mediations. And so I think we need to keep figuring out how we can get people to sit down. And part of it is building relationships and having those established, because we haven't been able to do that with this program, of having someone who's like the face of it, build those relationships in the community, like UCSB's housing office has been able to do with that one dedicated staff member doing that. But it's a big challenge, and I've struggled to think about how we overcome that part of it, of the party that didn't make the request for mediation can just ignore us right now, and there's not a lot we can do about that. But the more we can do to try to get them to not ignore us, we really could be we're welcome to more ideas and brainstorm. And that's why the recommendation is, I don't know if we'll come up with a conclusion today, but maybe the work group that was already formed can talk again on a broader scope of the program, and we can see how we can make it something really workable in the long run for that next year, and include those decisions in our budget.
I would add that our greatest challenge is building that rapport with the property owner or the landlord, so that they feel compelled to participate in the mediation to find a solution. I think rapport and relationship is going to be critical moving forward with those organizations, to get them to participate in a way that's really viable in creating solutions for these disputes.
I agree with that. Thank you so much, Deborah, for all the work that you put into this report. It's really helpful, and I support our work group taking this up next. Our first meeting was very productive, so I think we can tackle this next.
I agree. Thank you, Ethan. This is a really thorough report. I appreciate you putting it together. There's, I think, a number of different categories of issues that need to be tackled. I think that we have already made a little bit of progress on one of those issues, which is marketing and outreach tonight, specifically with the last agenda item. I do want to note one thing that I guess I'm, as my layman's read of the two tables of the requests, you note that there's a number that were closed requests that were resolved outside of the mediation process. And my assumption is that that rate of people solving their requests outside of the process in a world where we don't have compelled participation from both parties is probably going to be pretty constant. And what my goal is, or what I've been thinking about, is how can we increase the volume of everything, though, so that we can get more of those instances that will need mediation, where mediation can be helpful in withdrawal issues.
Yeah.
And that to me really seems to be all about outreach. But regardless of that too, just want to say really quickly, regardless of that too, I think it's worth it for us to look at a legislative fix to this problem. I don't know how feasible that is, but I think, just speaking from the issues we're talking about tonight, it's the right thing to do. This is common practice in other cities where they do compel both parties to come to the table. And I think especially in this crisis, I think the economic circumstances are making our legislators think a lot about how they can help. And so I think that it's worth broaching the subject with ours. Deborah, I cut you off. Did you want to respond to anything that I mentioned?
Only that you're right. You're spot on, Spencer. You know, it's about getting people to come to the table, and without some sort of mechanism to make that happen, it doesn't happen. So if we also put more cases into the hopper, hopefully that will result in more people coming to the table to mediate the disputes. You're spot on.
Are there any other board members that have requests to speak?
Yes.
Hearing something?
Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
Okay. Let me just say, first of all, our staff has done a terrific job trying to make this this pony ride. But 27 cases in 2 years with how many rental units? This is a boondoggle. Sorry. We did a wonderful job of trying to make this work. But look, 27 cases is awful in terms of an investment. And rather than trying to figure out how do we market this, how do we, how do we build relationships, let's look at it and say, this is clearly outside of our area of expertise at this moment in time. We have greater responsibilities in terms of we're about to get slammed with the responsibility of running the community center and the clinic building. I don't want to give up on rental housing problems, but clearly our rental housing mediation program doesn't work. I mean, and and we're having serious problems trying to get qualified people to work for it. So, I mean, let me be the one guy that says, you know, when you have a program like this and you're running an enterprise and you look at it like this, you go, that's not working. Walk away from it and move on to things that work. I just don't see that us pouring more money into it and more time and more energy is going to change that. Marketing is not going to change this dynamic. Okay, go for it.
Hey, George, I just want to mention to you, not disagreeing or agreeing with you, but in terms of the spend on this program over the last 2 years, I don't have the numbers for the 2018-2019 fiscal year off the top of my head. I can get that very quickly, though. But for this fiscal year, we spent $1,400. So, you know, no, not 14,000, $1,400.
Okay, all right.
For Brandy's time, like for the $50 an hour that she charged.
Yeah. Okay.
Most of that was for her time, like doing the office hours, which again, like Deborah mentioned, we only had one person utilize between August 2019 and January 2020 when she was doing those. But you know, we did, but the way we budgeted this program was, you know, 20% of Deborah's salary is pegged to this for her to work on it, and then just a pool of money like 26,000.
Right. Well, I have a feeling we're going to be giving Deborah greater and bigger responsibilities in the near future. You know, you're right. $1,400, that's nothing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, how much of your time and energy and intellectual management time went into trying to make this thing go? Because I know you put a ton of time into it.
Yeah, especially the first year, a lot of my energy went into this, and then we were trying to shift some of those responsibilities to Deborah. But it is a program that does take it to repurpose it is going to take some work and effort. It's going to take some focus to be able, and I think that's what I mentioned at the last board meeting is we need, you know, if we want this to really change or adapt or, you know, be the program it can be, if you know, what we originally wanted, it's going to take concentrated effort to do that, which I also will say we haven't been able to give it that. We've had a lot of other major projects and programs that have been given attention, and this one hasn't gotten the same amount, and that could be a reason why it's suffering. But also we do have limited attention and time and energy and intellectual capacity to focus. So that's why it's really hard to even have come up with the recommendation for tonight. The recommendation is just to keep talking on what we want to do, because we weren't able to figure that out.
And I totally agree with you, Jonathan. And I'm not trying to be obstinate here. I just wonder if this is a product that our constituents are not ready for.
I mean, if I can jump in here, I do want to make one point that I think we all know pretty well, which is that 25% of our population every single year are new renters who have just signed a lease for the first time. That, on top of the fact that every 4 years, the majority of the population completely turns over, means that there is a need for concerted marketing and outreach on this effort that is sustained in a way that is above and beyond what may be necessary in other communities. So it doesn't feel to me like we've exhausted those options. And it also doesn't feel to me like this has been a waste of time in any sense of the word. I think that we have been able to see some results from it. And as I mentioned, we've had a number of cases that have been resolved outside of the mediation process. And I think that it would be fair to say that the interjection of the mediation ask definitely played some role in that outcome, whether or not they were sitting at the table with the landlord when they figured out what it was. So I get your points, George. I think that there's still more that we can do, and I think our housing group can work on it and bring back maybe some more specific recommendations that we've talked about tonight, but also bring you back sort of a little bit of a cost benefit analysis, because your point is well taken that it's not just the small amount of money that we spend on a mediator, it's also our staff time, and we want to make sure that we're being conscious of that. I see Jay's had his hand up, patiently waiting. I'm going to go over to him.
So I want to start by saying that I very much appreciate George's comments here, and I feel them. I look at this and I see 27, 2 years, and it almost feels embarrassing. But it is the case that it has been somewhat, in the grand scope of things, of other things we spend money on, somewhat cheap, partly because of the fact that it's been kind of almost half staffed for a lot of the time. Like I sometimes describe to people that our mediator position is nearly cursed with relation to things either happening to the mediator or like like they're bad, or things that are happening that are good. Then it's just it's been difficult for us to keep that position staffed, which is, I think, has been a problem with relation to our ability to actually get a lot of mediation throughput, and also to be able to, as came up during our previous agenda item, talking about how to really, right from the beginning of this one, how to really connect with the landlords in order to really pull them into the table and being able to actually have that kind of clout respect. Now, that said, I really feel that point, but I think that, to me, one of the core issues that we always perceived in Isla Vista, one of the things that had always been one of the dynamics, the more fundamental systemic dynamics that led to almost the need for us to have some kind of more organized general purpose government in the area, was specifically to deal with this first time renter problem and the landlord tenant housing, landlord tenant aggressive dynamic. It was essentially looking at and some of the core people who were involved in constructing this district originally kind of were going in even with like a strong, like, no, this entire point of this district is going to be to try to like do something that really changes that dynamic and really messes with that power structure of landlords just preying on all of our first time renters. And I think that this is therefore a really important program for us to really, before we would give up on it, I really want to figure out exactly what was failing. And personally, I feel like I know, it's not just a marketing thing. We sometimes talk about like, well, how do we market this better? How do we tell people about things? I've pointed this out during a previous meeting where we were talking about the limited, narrow-focused public information officer for our public safety that would be working under the sheriff's department. We need a public information officer. Like Isla Vista needs that position, and Isla Vista and the Isla Vista Community Service District should really be running that position. And that is something that, when we talk about these things, about making certain that that tenants know what their rights are and things like related to these. Okay, well, that's a topical issue that we need to have engagement with the community on. It's not just a matter of putting together a pamphlet and sending it to everybody. It's a matter of having a coordinated media push that then responds to comments as they come in, and is able to then react to, oh, it seems like people are confused about this, and able to push out more information on that. And I've pointed this out before, but between like 2014, like 2016, I happened to be really bored. And I also happened to be really engaged and like driven in a few places. And I spent time working on doing that kind of effort. And the people of Isla Vista actually enjoy it. They actually want to be engaged with in that level. This is how companies engage with people. And this is how governments should be engaging with people. And I got thousands of people to follow the page that I was maintaining, IB as a city, and that Britt and I were working on, like, okay, what kind of post we put in here, figuring out how to like better apply, like something would come up during a meeting about like parking issues, and then like figuring out how to make that like a fun and engaging post that people would actually want to share and make or information on, like the N95 masks that I brought up before, that people are weirdly resurfacing, because like there's information on how to tell what kind of mask you had, and like people still like this is coming up again, like how do you know what kind of mask you have? Isla Vista needs this kind of position, and we should really be running, and we should really be funding it. It needs to have the respect of being a full-time, full-on position. And we also need to be thinking about this in perspective of like an orientation process. Like we have this kind of turnover in Isla Vista, right? Like every people come in and they live in IV for 3 years. Maybe they're engaged with IV sort of for 4 years, although most of the freshmen that I ever engaged with, like ever dealt with, they didn't really spend any time in IV. But like they have an engagement in IV for 3 years, and then they leave, and we've got this like recycling process. And so we really need to kind of pick up the ball and be that kind of like orientation process. You show up in IV, and the whole thing. Our social media presence is pushing on this. The things that we're providing to people, and whether it be in the mail or door hangers, are this kind of orientation process surrounding a community management. I don't mean like a community organizer process that you hear from politics. I mean like a social media community management process that you hear from like online projects and things like companies and like open source projects and things do. In order to really provide that, when you show up, hey, everyone here is now a new tenant. Everyone here should understand that these are the things that are going to be coming up at these sorts of time intervals, and then figuring out if we're going to have certain kinds of events that are coordinated around that, and all of that. Again, it's just companies don't just do this arbitrarily. They don't have their PR person just kind of like do it as kind of like press release blasts. They don't have it just be part of their ad budget. They have people whose job is to be dedicated to doing that sort of thing, and we should as well.
Thank you, Jay, for your comments. Are there other board members that would like to speak? Okay. Are there any members of the public that have comment on this item? Okay, I'm gonna bring it back then. I think that we're at the point again where we need to have some more finite conversations about the plan, about how this works. Our staff has done a really good job of putting together some ideas. I think our board has some things that we can build on for the future of this. And I think Ethan had suggested that we bring this back to the housing work group. I think I'm very supportive of that. I think it's a great idea. So if anyone has a motion to that effect, would be willing to entertain it.
You can just have the motion be to implement the recommendation of the report, because that's the recommendation.
Okay, I'll move recommendation in the report.
Okay, we have a motion made by Bertrand. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Director Nguyen. Made by Bertrand, seconded by Nguyen. Is there any board comment? Any public comment? All right, I'll call the question. We'll do a roll call vote. Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Hey, Director Brandt?
Yeah.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Thurlow?
Yes.
Director Geis?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Director Nguyen?
Yes.
Director Hedges?
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, staff, to your work on this. We'll be looking forward to bringing more back. Okay, now we're going to item 4.5, the building assessment services for the Isla Vista Community Center and Community Resource Building. Jonathan, I know we have a closed session item on this as well, on the Community Resource Building in general. I don't know if there's a way that you think it would be best to take this so that we...
Yeah, I can just talk about this and not mention closed session issues related to it when I talk about it. And then Deborah's going to talk more about the technical details of what research she's done. But basically, we are looking at growing our role with the community center and the community resource building, and putting in resources into those buildings, whether they're physical or personnel. And a big thing that we've talked about if we're moving towards that, is doing an assessment of those buildings, so that if we were to take on more assets or more responsibilities, we could have an independent and clear sense of the state of those buildings that we own and that we produce. And so that's the idea behind this, is that we do a building assessment of both 970 and 976 Embarcadero Del Mar. And we take it out of the new program development, because we're building this program of and growing it, of operating these two buildings. And so Deborah has done some research on some vendors that provide these kinds of services. It's actually very hard to find these kinds of people. So based on, if anyone knows additional options, that would be good. I think Deborah was able to find two, one of them in time to link to the agenda, and another one that came in today. So I'll turn it over to her to talk to you all more about these vendors and what exactly they do and how much they cost.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of commercial property inspectors in the immediate Santa Barbara geographical area. I was able to locate a total of 4 that I think we could really draw upon to use in the Santa Barbara area. The nearest vendor, it comes to us out of Simi Valley. Because they would have to travel here, there's even one vendor who said, I'm going to build in a travel charge for those inspections also. I made it clear that what we were looking for was an inspection that would provide us with the information that we need in regards to the condition of the property. So we are looking for an inspection that will give us a full picture in regards to the condition of our HVAC systems, our electrical and plumbing systems, whether there is a need for repair and replacement. We know that both of the buildings have work that needs to be done from a replacement perspective, such as the roof on our building would need to be replaced. It looks like we may have some work that has to be done in the community center with grading or flooring that would require some replacement. So we are also asking vendors to provide us with, if they can, some forecasting costs about the maintenance for those particular systems in the property or in those buildings. We're asking them to do the inspections for both of those buildings so that we have a better picture of what would be involved going forward. And as Jonathan pointed out, we were able to get a quote from one earlier in the week, and then a second quote which just came in today, and I have one more that I'm hoping we can will agree to do the inspection and provide us with some sort of costing information. But you're looking at anywhere from, very conservatively, $500 to $4,200 for an inspection of this type. And I am looking for someone outside of the County of Santa Barbara Assessor's Office so that we truly have an independent evaluation of the building. Are there any questions about that?
Spencer?
Thank you, Deborah. Any board members have clarifying questions? Go ahead,
I know,
George.
Bob, I know you do, Bob.
No, I'm gonna make a motion. Bob's
George
gonna
first.
second it for $500 to 2,000, 2,500. I think this is a good thing for us to do. I don't see that we need to noodle it very much. Bob, weigh in here on whether or not you think this is going to add any value based on your experience. But my thought is, for $500 to $2,000, it's not worth the grief here. So I'd be happy to make a motion that we direct staff to go ahead and retain an inspector based on their evaluation of their qualifications.
I'd second that motion.
Do you want to put a cap on the on the funding? Or
you know what? I'm going to leave it up. You know, the staff. I trust you guys.
Thank you.
So,
you know what?
Is the spending limit that we have for you right now? Is it 4,000?
It's 1,500.
1,500. Okay, I was a little off
1,500?
base.
It's the general manager's authority to spend without board approval of the spending.
But we can give you the authorization to enter into a contract, and then you bring it back to the board under consent. And when I mean it, I mean the invoice.
Yeah.
So then, if that's the spirit of the motion made by George and Father John, I think that sounds good to me. But I see I've got a hand up from Bob, who's probably going to have something to say. So I'm going to go over to Bob first.
well, first, I think this is me pushing this, and knowing what we've been through with the mold, knowing what we've been through with the leaks already, knowing that somebody asked the question of, you know, regarding that pandemic, is the ventilation system for the leasee of the health clinic separate from the ventilation system on our side? Nobody knows the answer to it. You know, it's very nice that the county is offering to make us the leaseholder of this building. But the question gets to be, what are we really committing to, and what are the conditions of those buildings? I don't have to be an inspector to know that we're not meeting the ADA requirements. When they're going to give us the building, the back door didn't open. You still don't have a window to that back door to see what's going on out there. You know, what is the real condition of those buildings, and what are we going to run into? We take it over as a lease, and are we just going to, you know, we need to have a good idea, and some of these building assessments can be really good. I was surprised that of the $500 to the $4,200 range, I was thinking this service would cost more like $10,000 for people to really go in there and give us an honest assessment. And I'd like to see from these companies, whoever we accept, I'd like to see what their reports look like. Where have they done a good, you know, assessment of a government building, and show me the results of your report and what we're going to get for our money. I agree with George. If it's just a, you know, the county assessor walking around and say, yeah, the building's this round, and and the walls are standing, you know, that's not what I'm interested in. I want to know, how much money are we going to have to stick in there? You know, what's the age of the air conditioning system? What's the age of the water system? What are the sewer lines like? I mean, we could be buying you know, the county may be just agreeing to this to, as someone said, and I won't say who, they're just offloading it on us because they can't maintain these buildings. They don't have enough money. Now they're making a very generous offer for us that we're going to manage both buildings. And, you know, I would have a hard time ever turning, you know, my nose down about saying we are the right agency to do this. We are the right agency to put the programs in. We are the right agency to help do the fundraising. To, you know, I think about this and say, well, maybe we need a $5 million investment in that property. And we need to go out and raise $5 million to make that what it should be. I don't know, maybe it's 2 million. But I don't think that the buildings in their current conditions are what the community deserves. But I'll now shut up. And, you know, we're going to go into a big work session of, you know, we're, you know, if we really are going to take over these buildings, you know, we need a strategic plan. We need a plan on its operations. We need a strategic development plan of where do we take these buildings over a long period of time. So, you know, as we delve into the to the conditions of the lease, you know, some of those issues will come up. But I don't think we should be cheap on doing these building assessments.
So, Bob, I want to let you know that all of the vendors that I have contacted, I've made it clear that these are commercial buildings, that they are currently owned by the county, and we're looking to assume the ownership of these buildings, or, you know, there's a possibility that we'll assume the ownership along with the management of these buildings. So I am looking for vendors who have done work in commercial properties and county-owned properties. The two vendors that I have already contacted, both of them have done work in the county of Santa Barbara for buildings that are county-owned buildings also, or have been used by the county before. And both of the vendors have talked to the assessment of the building systems. Again, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, structural, retrofit, type of building construction. And I have, just based on my time here since August and working on keeping the buildings up and running to their best, I know how serious it is that we get a true assessment of the condition of these buildings before we begin to take on the management.
Yeah, I agree. I hear you, hear me.
Yeah.
And I think that we just need to make sure whoever the firm we hire is, we see some samples of their work to say, oh, we're going to get something that we're going to pay, you know, we're going to pay when we want to get something good out of the deal.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do have one vendor who's already agreed to provide us with that. So I will continue to work on that as I reach out to the other vendors to finalize their proposed service.
Yeah, it sounds like the one for $500 is like doing an assessment of the property for how much it's worth or what its sale price could be.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of, I don't want a real, I don't want an appraisal of the property for how much it's sell for. Even though I wouldn't mind having them give me saying what's the value of the building we're taking.
Right.
I mean,
No,
I
we're
know what the
looking for-
redevelopment agency paid. You know, we paid them $1.5 million for the
Right.
healthcare center building, and I can't recall off the top of my head how much we paid for the church, but
So,
Yes,
so let me just,
I have, let me just
sorry, Deborah,
ask
go
you
ahead.
really quick. Again, Bob, I am looking at the building condition, the details surrounding the condition of the buildings present and possible need for repairs or maintenance costs going forward. And I have actually sent out a request to the California Special Districts Association to see if there are some folks that can give us a recommendation about someone that they've dealt with specifically at another CSD. So we're going to hound this down to finding out what condition the buildings are actually in before we assume the maintenance for them.
and I would include the landscaping and the parking lots, and you know,
yes.
I mean, the weeds are already growing back in the park department's parking lot from the nice overlay they did.
Yeah. No, that is one of the considerations. Also, is the lot. So we're trying to cover all those bases when we look at a vendor that can give us a true value of the condition of the buildings.
So I think, Bob, your points are well taken. Let's cut once, measure twice. It sounds, I think that your suggestion that they all provide samples of work and then we all, or offline circle back and evaluate those is a good idea. Because we do want to make sure we get the right product. But I think that can be accomplished within the motion that's at hand here.
Yeah, but you guys approved up to what, just $4,000? To me, I'm not sure that buys us the right product.
Okay,
I mean,
so then I guess that we
I mean,
what is the
we're going to pay Lucidity $6,000 for do party planning, and we're going to take on the biggest project of 3 million or 4 million.
Well, no, Bob. So that's just the highest estimates that we've gotten so far. I'm definitely supportive of increasing that to give our staff the leeway that they need to get the best possible quality product.
Yeah, we
sounds
didn't
like
put
that's
a
the high
number
end.
of motion, so we could keep looking for other options and pick the best one.
Well, I'm happy to amend my motion to say up to $10,000 and give the staff. I mean, I agree with Bob. This is a huge investment we're about to make, and actually, it will pay off for us because in our discussions with other folks down the road, if we have a credible report from a credible consultant that says these buildings need this much, it certainly gives us a little bit of leverage with the county. So I'm willing to, if the board is okay with that, saying we'll give the staff discretion up to $10,000. And I think you've gotten good direction about what the board really wants to see.
Yeah.
That definitely would be friendly to the second, and I view upping the cap as has been proposed as this is both investment and insurance, and I think this is a good way to move forward on that.
Yeah, and we have the budget for it. The new program development program was $29,000 or $30,000 and was going to be spent entirely on the festival last week and didn't get spent. So it's budgeted money that for this kind of purpose.
The last comment I have here, reading these leases and reading the county bowl lease today that was executed in the late 90s. I think we really need this building assessment to be the launch point for us doing a strategic plan, or not a strategic plan, but a master plan for the future development of the buildings. And I noticed in the county bowl, they had a really complex master plan, and back in the 90s, the early 90s, that place was a dump. And through that master plan that the Santa Barbara Bowl Foundation was, the Parks Department, then the Bowl Foundation, they made that into a beautiful structure, and they raised the money in the community to do it. And if you read the bowl lease, that could be a similar lease to what we really want to do with the community center, and all the various things in the county bowl, that they can do and use that facility for, even though it's pretty much a music venue. There's some good stuff in there.
Thank you for that, Bob.
I just think this is the base thing we need. Anyways, I'm done.
Can I call for the question?
I'm in agreement with your urgency, Bob. If there's no other discussion from board members, I'm comfortable with that. Does anyone have anything else? Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, let's call the question. Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Yep, Director Brandt.
Yes.
Director Freeman.
Yes.
Director Thurlow.
Yes.
Director Geis.
Yes.
Director Bertrand.
Abstain.
Director Nguyen.
Yes.
Director Hedges.
Yes.
Great. Motion passes.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 1 abstention. Thanks, everyone. I'm excited for this one. Okay. We're now going to go to 4 cents, the census grant update.
Yeah, in the interest of time, it is getting late and we have a very important item still coming up. I can email you all this update. I needed to put this on to let you know that we were readjusting parts of the grant we got from the county and the Santa Barbara Foundation as part of our process to send to them, that we're readjusting the grant due to COVID-19. And they just needed me to let you know as part of our grant that we were doing that. So I'll send you an email about this, and we can talk about it more next meeting, but I think we should move on to more pressing issues right now. This is not very urgent.
Okay, thank you for deferring that, Jonathan. We'll go to 4.8, which is payment for Lucidity LLC January to March consulting services for the community festival.
Great. So this item is, I'm waiting for it to come up. So Lucidity, in the time they spent in the last 4 months in helping us plan the festival that wasn't able to take place, did do some work in the community and logistically to help us put together the proposal for the Spring Community Festival. And then they asked if they could be compensated for the work that they did perform that was critical to putting on the festival that didn't happen. So I told them I'd bring it to the board for decision, since I didn't have any authority to make that decision, and since we hadn't approved any funding for this event. And so I'm bringing it to you. I mean, I will tell you that the things that they did do, some of them, like working with the fire department and putting together the security plan, it's work that we could repurpose next year and not have to spend again. So, I think it does fall in line with our new program development, and it does save us costs next year. And I think we can make that clear to them, that if we are paying them right now for these things, and these things don't need to happen again next year, and we're doing this again next year, then we wouldn't want to pay for these points again. So that's this item. I'm happy to take questions. No one was able to come on from Lucidity, but I can answer some questions.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion made by Thurlow. Is there a second to that? So we can keep the discussion going.
I seconded
Somebody
it.
did second it. Yeah.
Okay, seconded by Geis. Okay, I'm going to open discussion and go to Director Freeman.
Yeah, given that we did kind of waste a lot of their time, and given that we can reuse the work, and given that we want to work with them again in the future, I'm strongly supportive of this. Another interesting thing I'll just point out is that the event managers that I know they're one of the people who are hit most hard right now by this whole COVID situation. I don't know to the extent to which Lucidity was like a profit center before, but certainly I've known even events that are quite profitable tend to, over the course of an entire year, burn a lot of money elsewhere. And Lucidity has been, as far as I just heard earlier today, I should have known it a while ago, but it has been canceled. And so it's something this year. And so it could be that this is also just like they might just really need some money from us. And so I'm perfectly happy paying them for the work that they did.
Thanks, Director Freeman. I don't necessarily view this as charity on our behalf, although I am sympathetic to that situation. I think that they've done a number of different things for us. Sat in too many meetings with Jonathan and I, the Sheriff's Department, other stakeholders in the community for me to count, and have put together so many different documents that we've needed to progress through the process. I don't see this as waste whatsoever. I think this is really, again, they've laid the foundation for us, and we are now compensating them for that. So I
feel like you took my comments in a really
no.
I feel like you took my comments in a really weird place. It was not that I was saying that we wasted a lot of our time and we should be paying them, but it's good to do it because it's charity. I'm saying that we kind of jerked them around and and they did work that we can reuse. And additionally, I think that it's something that would just be like the correct moral thing to do right now. So
yeah.
Sure, and didn't mean to put words in your mouth, just was the way that I phrased it. So I'll go over to Father John and then Bob.
Yeah, the force majeure of this moment does not allow us a cover for not paying for services that were done in good faith. And the work that they did on our behalf was done in good faith. This is just compensation. It's not charity. It's the right thing to do.
And I think this is a good investment, all the work that they did for the future running of the community center. All these kinds of services are putting on programs, and the discussions around security, the discussions are probably around alcohol at events, all that stuff is going to come up in our lease. And I think this is good work to have to say, how could we handle that without just hiring the sheriff's department or something? I'll call for the
Are
question.
there any other board comments? Okay, are there any public comments on the motion? Okay, with that, we'll call the question, and Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Director Brent,
Yes.
Director Freeman,
yes.
Director Thurlow,
Yes.
Director Geis,
Yes.
Director Bertrand,
Yes.
Director Nguyen,
Yes.
Director Hedges.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Okay, we're now going to go into closed session. Jonathan, I think you've got sort of the procedures on how that gets done, but can we read into the record the item?
Yes, Ross, could you read it real quick for a second, and I'll get the technology ready to do the closed session.
Right. The board is going to consider in closed session under Government Code Section 54956.6, real property negotiations. The properties at issue are 970 and 976 Embarcadero Del Mar, Isla Vista, California. The board previously appointed as agency negotiators, Board President Spencer Brandt, Vice President Bob Geis, Jonathan Aboud, the General Manager, and District Counsel Ross Trindle. Negotiating parties are the Isla Vista Community Services District and the County of Santa Barbara. And the issues are payment and terms of payment for a lease agreement.
Great. So what we're going to do for all the participants who aren't in the closed session, if you could please exit the call, and we're going to lock the meeting to just the board and the negotiating team. And then when the closed session is over, we will make a post on our Facebook page for those able to reach that people can rejoin, and we'll post the Zoom link there. So if you're not a part of the board or the negotiating team, please exit the meeting now. Sorry, my computer has slowed to a snail because of Zoom being open. 6 years old too, so.
It's my Bay Bridge. My Bay Bridge is taking all your gigs.
George, you know, UCSB put together some UCSB Zoom backgrounds.
Yeah, I just put that up because I pushed a button. I just learned how to use Zoom in the last week. And I pushed a button and up that came. So I thought, oh, what the heck?
You know, George, you could make the library your background.
Oh.
You could make Gervet's Hall your background.
How about Mosier? No.
Not sure about that one.
Yeah. Hey, so are we in sort of dead time here? Director's reports.
Are we back in open session?
For what it's worth, I am currently streaming this per the earlier comment.
Oh.
Okay. So then, for all intents and purposes, we've reconvened to open session. Council, is there any reportable action?
Oh wait, no. Is Jonathan ready with having the Facebook post? Like, you have the people.
Post has been made. The post has been made.
Okay.
Okay, and returning to open session, there was no reportable action taken during closed session by the board.
Okay, thank you, Council. We're going to enter Section 6, reports. First, reports for members of the board. Does anyone have reports to give?
I just have a comment. I don't know if anybody's looked at the Santa Barbara County Healthcare Services website, Public Health, and they got really cool metrics on the coronavirus, if you're into kind of watching the metrics on it.
I am into the metrics. Thanks for that comment, Bob. Did we get Ethan and let him know that we're back in open session?
Yeah, I'll text him.
I told myself I was going to text him and I forgot to. So
I have
while that's happening, go.
I have a comment and a question. Am I unmuted?
Go ahead.
We can hear you.
Oh, I just want to mention Father John gave a wonderful homily at the county briefing, and I just wanted to say publicly that was really, really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's my question, which I sent to Jonathan and Spencer. Have we started to look at utility usage in Isla Vista and whether or not the dramatic exodus of residents is going to have an impact on our tax revenues?
Yeah, my email response to you, I think, was right before the meeting. But our finance committee has been talking about that, and we'll get our first data point on that next Monday when the tax comes in for March.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, George. I just didn't respond to you because we're Brown acted as the finance committee, but I'll give a report on finance committee.
Okay, got it. No worries.
So Spencer knows you're breaking up for me a lot. I don't know if your Spencer's breaking up for everyone else a lot.
I can't hear Spencer. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me now?
I can.
Yes.
Can anyone else hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So go ahead, Jay, and you're welcome to give your report.
Yeah.
We
So
lost you
the
again, Spencer.
for what it's worth, he asked me to give my report.
Oh,
so,
okay. Good.
I heard that much. So I just wanted to make sure people knew that there's an ongoing set of conversations at the Park District about the houseless community in Isla Vista, and there's actually a kind of a feeling surrounding them that the discussion is being presented as like what to do about them because they're using the parks in a potentially inappropriate manner and people are complaining, and so it's been very important to have people show up to these meetings in order to be able to demonstrate that there are people in the community who are on the opposite side, that they care a lot about the houseless community and want to make certain that there's good support for them, and they don't want them, for example, displaced out of the parks at this critical time or moment. That said, to be clear though, it's not that there's an overall consensus certainly feeling like that. Certainly, I mean, even the staff reports from Ray are making it clear that there's reasons to not break people apart, and there's commentary from a few of the board members, but it is something that it comes up And there's discussions about things that are sort of like curfews or restrictions on certain types of temporary installations and that are coming up that are kind of potentially concerning. And so again, people know that there's this kind of a series of conversations that are occurring at the Park District, and if anyone wants to poke their head in, might be useful.
Thank you for that, Jay. If there are no other board reports, I'll go ahead and give mine. So the main thing I wanted to update the board on is in regards to the county budget process. There are two big developments that I think everyone should just be aware of. The first is that the sheriff is proposing for the third time in the last 4 years to cut the community resource deputy position for Isla Vista. I and a number of other residents, part of the Isla Vista community network, sent a letter to the sheriff and the board of supervisors that urges the sheriff not to cut that position. We overview all of the great work that we have been able to accomplish with Justin in particular in that role. I really want to give him a shout out just for everything that he's done over the last year and a half or so. It's really just been under the leadership that Lieutenant Camarena and Justin by his side provides. It's been a totally different experience for me in terms of dealing with law enforcement in Isla Vista, and I think it's been really positive. So we do our best to communicate that to the sheriff and make the point that the position should be continued. I think I make it pretty clear in the letter and just in general that it's really upsetting that this is the third time in the last 4 years that this position is being proposed to be cut. And the sheriff responded to me and told me that essentially the way he views it is that there's a structural staffing deficit at the sheriff's department, and he has no other choice but to cut it if his budget gets cut. So I think it's really going to be up to us to try and put the pressure on him to say we don't agree with that assessment. This is a political game that is being played, make no mistake. And it is, again, evidenced by the fact that this keeps coming up third time in the last 4 years. And he has been bailed out by the county board of supervisors the previous 2 times that he's tried this. And, it's getting to the point where I think he needs a little bit of accountability to say that he should be more committed to law enforcement and public safety in Isla Vista engagement, public safety in Isla Vista. So that's my 2 cents on the matter, but I wanted to keep you updated on that. The second thing is there's a discussion at the Board of Supervisors about library funding. We were told earlier today that there's this big concern about where over the course of this budget cycle. There are members of the Board of Supervisors right now that are making a big effort to make sure that library funding from the county isn't cut. And I think we're all very supportive of that. They're specifically looking at making sure that their $7.80 per resident stays constant in their per capita funding formula, which is the $200,000 that many of us have been referring to about the money that Isla Vista contributes for libraries. And so there's effort that Supervisor Williams is actually leading to try and keep that funding going and backfilling it with the cannabis tax revenue that the county is additionally taking in this year. And so I'm not a budget guru, but it seems like they're in a better position than they have been in years past in facing a fiscal shortfall, which gives me a little bit of all we can do in these weird times is have hope. So that's sort of where I'm at on that. That's pretty much all that I've got to report. Are there any other reports from members of the board?
Can I just jump right back in? Sorry. I just took a little walk, and while I was walking, I thought of something. Jonathan and Deborah, when the next round of Pelosi stimulus packages come out, we should keep an eye out. If we are hit with a decrease in utility users tax, the next round of stimulus is supposed to be going to local governments and state governments. We should keep an eye out in terms of whether we can apply for some backfill if we lose revenue.
Yeah, Spencer and I are on the county's legislative briefings twice a week where they bring some of this stuff up, and it's definitely on our radar.
Good, thank you.
Great point, George. Transitions well into one thing that I forgot, which is I've been really trying to advocate to make sure that our between 17 and 22 or 23-ish year old residents are included in the stimulus checks. And happy to report our member of Congress has signed on to co-sponsor the bill that would do that. It remains to be seen where that bill goes, but I think it's of high priority. Young people were really kind of screwed on that one. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. The second thing in relation to that, transitioning into reports from committees, is I want to give a report from the Finance Committee. The first thing is, when we've been looking at revenue, we haven't really been anticipating a drastic decrease in revenue. And as you know, if you're familiar with the Finance Committee or have sat on the committee before, we are very, very conservative when it comes to revenue estimates. However, one of the things to note is that since we get all money from utility usage and people are using their utilities more now than ever, staying at home and staying inside, we think that there's a pretty good chance that we don't really end up with that much of a hit compared to some of these other revenue sources that local governments have, such as sales tax, such as hotel bed taxes, So that's a little bit of a silver lining for us that will, I think, hopefully allow us to continue on the track that we're on. I just want to give some of the committee has talked about for the budget this next year. The first is community planning. We've spoken with Supervisor Hartman's office about the need to open up process and discussions about planning in Isla Vista as it relates to transportation and circulation and housing. So we're hoping to include some money for some outreach regarding that hopefully in the next fiscal year could result in county planning staff beginning to work on an Isla Vista plan. Second is Lucidity, or the Isla Vista Festival, building on the work that we've done and scaling it up. The third is these, and this is probably, I'm naming these as the first, second, and third, but I think facilities is actually the highest on our list. We want to make sure that we set the district up for success when it comes to our maintenance of the agreement. The third is the compost collective, making sure that they are codified in our budget. We have a grant for this year, and we would hope that we would continue to receive similar grant funding in the future, but making sure that they are in there is important. Fifth is a grant writer. We want to try to invest our dollars further, specifically for the community center and the community room and anything facilities related. Last thing, I think that's just about it. Bob's on the committee too. If he's got anything else he wants to add as a priority, he can. But other than that, that's what we've discussed so far, bringing a preliminary budget to the board in the future. Are there any other reports from committees? Okay, we'll go to a report from District Council.
Just a quick report to let the board know that my office is continuing to monitor the executive orders that come out from the governor and other state agencies that might have an impact on the provision of services under the Isla Vista Community Services District. And we're just compiling that information. If it's relevant, then I put together an analysis, and I've been sending it out to the board. Unless people don't want to receive those updates anymore, I'm just going to keep doing that. For the most part, the updates don't apply, but obviously we're keeping an eye on things, and we'll continue to provide efficient updates as may be necessary moving forward.
Thanks, Ross. I've enjoyed watching your cat in the background of the video stream. Okay, over to Jonathan, General Managers.
Yeah, well, a lot of my report were agenda items on the meeting today. A couple things I want to note are the census is the big focus for the work of our interns right now, and they've been doing an amazing job, and I'll tell you more about that at another meeting. The COVID-19 resources page is another thing that our interns helped put together, and it was sent out to our email list, but please share that with other people. It's a accumulation of all the different lists that everyone else in Isla Vista has put together. So we tried to make a list of the lists. The budget process was already mentioned, but it's going well, and we'll have the preliminary budget for the board to look at the next meeting. And so look forward to that. You'll get a preview of it if you check out the Finance Committee meeting agenda that is for next week, which might be moved if we end up doing this meeting on the 21st. So we'll stay, we'll keep an eye on that. The Compost Collective has, it's up and running. We have we've hired the 4 people doing the administrative work of it. We haven't hired the people doing the compost collection. I've been worried that could be a way to spread the virus in Isla Vista potentially. And so we paused that for now. We're hoping to get clearance from public health if that's something that's okay to continue doing under certain, parameters or not, but we haven't gotten that yet. But I will tell you that, this taking on the Compost Collective has not been like a small amount of work. It's been maybe about 20 hours of the last, this week and last week. So it's a big lift to do, and it's happening, and the people we've hired who are part of it they're very good. But it is, it's no small task. The website, Spencer and I are talking more on the website later this week, but improvements will be ongoing for the rest of the quarter, especially since now one of our interns is fully committed to working on it. And we reviewed a lot of changes today. So if you have any changes that you're interested in seeing to our website, please just email me and we'll get those incorporated. We have a very long list. Again, the community center staff is no longer with us, but I'll be handling the day-to-day things of if there are uses of those buildings for the emergency response, please get those to me. And Ethan and I are both on the county's homelessness and housing task force, and looks like there might be an ask to do some service delivery out of the community center. So I'm working on talking about how that could be structured and how it would look like, and I can share with you more at the next meeting. And then also lastly, please spread the word about our budget survey so that we can have more community participation. It hasn't been so great, even though we've been sending it to some classes and all over social media. We haven't had a lot of responses, so please get that out there to your networks. And lastly, I do participate in almost too many calls over the week between like the legislative briefing, the homeless calls, the Isla Vista calls, the family calls, legal aid. But if there's anything else that is important that you think the CSD needs to have representation on, let me know and I'll make sure we can get on this. Like, for example, the housing one, we weren't on that one until maybe like 2 weeks ago, and there's been a lot of good information there that we got into our website. So please let me know of anything. It is a little bit too much on the calls, but sometimes they actually are very helpful. So yeah, hope everyone's staying safe.
Thank you, Jonathan. I want to say thank you to you and Deborah. you've really weathered this new storm of COVID-19 and working remotely like champs, and really proud of you guys and appreciative of what you do from afar here. And looking forward to when we can all get back together to thank you in person. So with that, our next board meeting is going to take place on the 28th. That's our next regular meeting. We'll keep our eye out to see if we have special meetings scheduled as permitting. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Motion made by Freeman. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Director Nguyen. Any public comment? Any board discussion? All right, Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Director Brent,
Yes.
Director Freeman, Director
Aye.
Zerlo,
Yes.
Bertrand, Nguyen, and Hedges.
Yes.
You have my yes?
Yeah, I got it.
All right.
Okay, thanks everyone. The meeting is adjourned. Motion passes 6-0 with one absence. Take care, everyone, and stay healthy and safe.
Good night.
Good night.
Good to see you
Bye.
guys.